While helping ants fight, I accidentally discovered a miniature world. A boiled egg I casually dropped inside could feed their entire village of 100 people for 5 days. From that day on, I became a god in their eyes. It wasn't until later, when I saved a thumb-sized girl and understood their language, that I realized this wasn't a toy at all, but a real medieval European continent currently amidst a great famine and war. At this moment, the girl I had saved, Illyra, was carrying a broken wooden basket, desperately digging for tree bark in the dried mud. If she occasionally dug up a wild vegetable leaf, she would protect it tightly in her arms like a treasure. I was just about to turn around and grab some breadcrumbs to feed her, but just as she ran back to Oakhaven village, a sudden change occurred. Yellow dust rolled up on the outskirts of the sandbox, and a group of bandits wielding rusted swords and riding inferior horses frantically charged into the village. They clamored for food. The terrified villagers held their doors tightly shut. One bandit kicked open a broken wooden door and dragged out the girl from earlier and her mother. The girl knelt on the ground, crying and begging for mercy, saying there was no food left in the house. The bandit leader, however, had absolutely no sympathy. He simply raised his sword and brought it down. The girl's mother was struck down by the sword. The girl threw herself onto the corpse, wailing loudly. The bandit leader grinned hideously, raising his blood-stained sword again, aiming at the back of the girl's neck. A surge of nameless anger rushed straight to my head. Bullying people right in front of my eyes? Screw you. I lifted the glass top cover, extended my right index finger, aimed at the sword-wielding bandit leader, and flicked. Bang! The bandit flew out of the village like a bullet fired from a gun, streaked across the midair, and smashed heavily into the mud outside the village. His neck was twisted to the side at a bizarre angle, dead on the spot. With this flick, the box fell instantly into a dead silence. The group of bandits below were all dumbfounded. What happened? How did the boss fly out? They looked around but couldn't see me at all. Finally, dozens of pairs of vicious eyes locked onto the girl on the ground. Is this the witchcraft you cast? Another bandit leader drew his sword and approached the girl with murderous intent. I sneered, and my finger reached into the clouds again. Curl finger. Flick, smack. The second leader let out a miserable shriek and flew backward over a dozen meters. All the bones in his body shattered, and he was pasted onto the ground, motionless. The remaining bandits went crazy with fear, scurrying around like headless flies. At this moment, the girl suddenly raised her head. Her gaze pierced through the cloud layer of the diorama box and crashed straight into my Silas eyes. It was a pair of eyes filled with despair, fear, and a faint glimmer of hope. She fell to her knees on the ground and bowed deeply to me. Almighty Holy Lord, save us. My heart jolted. This wasn't a toy. These were fucking living people. Seeing a few bandits still trying to grab the girl, I was completely enraged. Go to hell, all of you. I raised my right hand, spread my palm, and slammed it down hard toward the group of bandits in the village. The sound of wind and thunder roared. From the bandits' perspective, the sky was falling. Smack! One bandit was crushed into a flat human pancake. Mashed flesh mixed with blood splattered all over the ground. Smack! Another one. Smack, smack, smack. I swung my palm continuously, like swatting mosquitoes. With every strike, a new pool of blood appeared on the ground. A few seconds later, dozens of bandits were completely wiped out, all turned into minced meat plastered to the ground. I withdrew my hand. It was entirely covered in the pungent smell of blood. Real blood. I leaned back in my chair, watching the villagers tremblingly walk out of their houses, confiscate the bandits' weapons, and dig holes to bury the corpses. This box of mine connected to a living, breathing miniature world. After washing my hands clean, I fell straight to sleep. Pulling continuous all-nighters combined with the recent adrenaline rush made me pass out completely. When I opened my eyes again, it was already the morning of the next day. I abruptly rolled out of bed and rushed to the diorama box. Illyra had left the village again, carrying her broken wooden basket, her footsteps weak and floating. She continued to dig for food in the dried, thoroughly turned over dirt from yesterday. She was starving. She couldn't hold on much longer. I blurted out, "This girl has it so hard." As soon as I spoke, Illyra threw her head back as if electrocuted. Her gaze once again crossed dimensions and locked dead onto my face. Merciful Holy Lord. She prostrate on the ground, trembling like a fallen leaf. "I am so hungry. I beg you to show mercy and save me." She wants food? Easy. I rushed into the kitchen. There happened to be 2 freshly hard-boiled eggs in the pot. I scooped one out, ran it under cold water to cool it down, and peeled off the shell. I spoke softly toward the box. "Girl, here is some food for you." Illyra stiffened all over, looking up at the sky in pleasant surprise. I pinched the peeled boiled egg with 2 fingers, slowly reached into the box, and gently placed it on the yellow sand in front of her. The girl's mouth gaped open. She was completely dumbfounded. From her perspective, how was this an egg? This was an ancient behemoth's egg, 30 meters long and over 10 meters high, pure white, emitting terrifying heat, lying across her path like a mountain of meat. Terrified, she stumbled back several steps and stuttered, Is this an egg? It's boiled. Just eat it directly," I said. She gathered her courage, leaned in, threw herself at it, and took a massive bite of the egg white. The next second, she grabbed the edges of the bite mark with both hands, buried her entire head into the yolk, and swallowed in large gulps like a madwoman, making muffled sounds of satisfaction. After taking a few bites, she abruptly pulled her head out and looked up at the sky timidly. "Lord Holy One, can I call the villagers to eat together? I can't finish it alone, and it will go bad tomorrow." I smiled. This girl really had a kind heart. "Go ahead, call them all over." The girl excitedly drew a cross on her chest, forcefully broke off a fist-sized chunk of egg yolk, held it in her hands, and sprinted back to the village. village. Brother Garrick, village chief Thomas. Everyone, come quickly, there's food. Before long, all Fortituo people in the village had gathered in front of the giant egg. Fortituo pairs of eyes stared wide open. Village chief Thomas Beard was trembling. Is this truly bestowed by the god? The strongman Garrick, who had taken a bite, nodded desperately. So fragrant. I've never eaten anything this fragrant in my life. The village chief made a prompt decision. Garrick, get a knife and cut it. Every family gets a large piece. No snatching. The villagers, holding broken wooden basins and shattered clay bowls, joyfully carved away the egg yolk and egg white. After the distribution, more than half was still left on the spot. They couldn't move it. Afraid that the egg would rot and pollute the environment, I reached my hand in, scooped up the remaining debris, and casually tossed it into the trash can. This sight of the giant egg ascending directly made the villagers fall to their knees. Fortituo people knelt in unison, shouting amen. This wouldn't do. Eating only boiled eggs meant unbalanced nutrition. I threw on some clothes, rushed downstairs, and headed straight to the supermarket. I bought a large bag of plump, premium oats and coarse wheat seeds, 2 pounds of streaky bacon, picked a few large cabbages, and grabbed a big bag of salt. Back home, I cut open the grain bag and grabbed a handful of snow-white, plump wheat seeds. The aroma of wheat hit my nose. I picked up a magnifying glass and aimed it at the girl's broken thatched cottage. It was totally bare and empty inside. Well, that's no fun. I cupped my hands into a funnel shape, aimed at the hole in her roof, and flipped my wrists. The stark white wheat poured down like a waterfall. Rustle, rustle, rustle. In the blink of an eye, half the house was packed tightly with giant wheat. I clapped my hands in satisfaction, pulled up a small stool, and waited for the good show. At dusk, Illyra returned to the village carrying half a basket of tree bark and wild vegetables. She had just unlatched the broken door of her house. Boom! Half a room's worth of wheat burst through the door like a flash flood, pouring out. To her, every single grain of wheat was an oval giant boulder over half a meter long and weighing over 100 pounds. She didn't have time to dodge at all. Seeing that she was about to be buried alive by the mountain of wheat, I quickly reached out my hand and gently blocked above the wheat pile. The sliding momentum of the giant wheat slowed down, but she was still tripped and sat slumped next to a 100-pound giant grain. She turned her head in terror, just in time to see my smiling face flash past in the sky. She understood instantly. The Holy Lord was playing a joke on her, sitting in the pile of wheat, stroking the grain that was thicker than her thigh. She couldn't help but burst into loud laughter. Even the grief of losing her mother was briefly washed away. Neighbors, hearing the commotion, all gathered around. Garrick rushed forward, struggled to push away a few giant grains, and pulled the girl out. The village chief looked at the millstone-sized wheat all over the ground, rubbing his hands together in excitement. Goodness, this wheat has to be chopped open before it can be boiled, right? A gift from the gods. Just as he finished speaking, an extremely arrogant and angry curse suddenly came from the village entrance. You poor ghosts of Oakhaven Village, stop playing dead. Hurry up and pay the taxes you owe Lord Baron. The faces of everyone in the village instantly turned deathly pale. Even crying children had their mouths tightly covered by adults. The village chief lowered his voice, stamping his feet in anxiety. Oh no, the Lord's tax collectors are here. Quick, stuff all the wheat back into the house. We absolutely cannot let them see it. Garrick led a few strong young men and desperately moved the giant wheat from the ground back into the house, tightly holding the door shut with their bodies. I narrowed my eyes, staring at the edge of the diorama box. At some point, 5 little people had appeared out of thin air inside the box, wearing red and black surcoats, with long swords hanging at their waists, and crests representing the Lord's authority printed on their backs. I walked 3 circles around the glass box. The top cover was sealed tight, and the ventilation holes were as small as pinpricks. How did they get in? This box was definitely not a simple closed container. The 5 tax collectors swaggered into the village. The leader cracked a leather whip. If you don't pay your taxes, you'll all be thrown into the dungeon. The village chief went up to meet them with an apologetic smile. My lords, there's been a severe drought for 3 years. The fields yielded nothing, and we've even eaten all the grass roots. We really have no grain. Bullshit. You unruly peasants just love to hide your grain. The tax collector shoved the village chief aside and took the lead in barging into the villagers' homes, rummaging through chests and cupboards. They quickly realized something was wrong. The eyes of everyone in the village were glancing toward the girl's broken house. Several young strongmen were using their backs to tightly prop up that broken wooden door. The lead tax collector sneered and strode over. Move! No one moved. Courting death. The tax collector delivered a flying kick, slamming hard into the door. Garrick and Illyra were kicked and tumbled to the ground. The wooden door, losing its support, burst open instantly. Crash. The white waterfall of giant wheat surged out again. The tax collector walking in the very front experienced pupil earthquake. He desperately backed up, but his lower half was still buried by the sliding giant wheat grains. The 4 tax collectors behind him drew their long swords in terror, acting as if facing a formidable enemy. The scene was dead silent for over 10 seconds. The tax collector, half buried in the wheat, finally reacted, howling at the top of his lungs. What are you watching a show for? Pull me out, quick! His 4 subordinates frantically dug him out. They looked at the half-meter-long oval white giant stones scattered all over the ground, completely dumbfounded. Is this wheat? How can it possibly be this big? The village chief straightened his back. This is the divine wheat bestowed by the Holy Lord. sword. If you dare to touch it, the god will never forgive you. The 5 tax collectors looked at each other. Their eyes were full of greed. The lead tax collector spat. Stop using pagan ghosts and gods to scare me. Such exotic treasures rightfully belong to the baron's castle. He pointed at the girl. This which is deceiving the public with her lies. Take her down. Bring her back to the stake. Silas took out my phone and went click, click, taking a few high-definition macro photos of the tax collectors. My left hand was already hovering over the box. Looking for death. Huh? Alright, I'll grant your wish. The girl looked at the approaching tax collectors and suddenly started screaming like crazy. Don't come closer. Run away quickly. The Holy Lord has already raised his hand. He will smash you all into meat paste. The tax collectors looked up at the sky. It was a clear, cloudless sky. There wasn't even a bird. Smelly bitch, still daring to play tricks. The lead tax collector grinned hideously, raised his sword hilt, and swung it down to smash the girl. I didn't wait any longer. I extended my left index finger and thumb, and like pinching a flea, precisely clamped down on the shoulders of that lead tax collector. Ah! The tax collector let out a scream like a slaughtered pig. He felt his shoulders being tightly clamped by 2 invisible massive mountains. His bones emitted teeth-hatching crack sounds and instantly fractured. I raised my wrist. Both his feet left the ground. He was pinched up out of thin air by me, suspended over a dozen meters in the air, pedaling his legs frantically. A demon! There's a demon! The remaining 4 tax collectors wet their pants in terror and plopped down on their knees. The tax collector in midair soiled himself, crying and begging for mercy. Grandpa God, spare my life. This lowly one will never dare again. I curled my lips in disgust. I took a deep breath, aiming at the 4 tax collectors on the ground, and blew hard. Whoosh boom. A gale rose from the flat ground. A Category 12 typhoon executed a precision strike. The 4 tax collectors were blown away like rolling gourds, flying backward for several meters, tumbling and crawling before falling flat on their faces. I lowered my voice and spat out 2 words toward the box. Get lost. My voice was like a massive bell, shaking the sandy ground. The girl immediately shouted, "The Holy Lord told you to get lost. You are forbidden to speak a word of what happened today." Yes, yes, yes. This lowly one absolutely won't breathe half a word. I loosened my fingers. The tax collector in midair plummeted onto the sandy ground with a splat, knocked completely dizzy. Tumbling and crawling, he followed his 4 colleagues, running wildly out of the village like a madman. I stared intently at their escape route. They ran to the edge of the dried land, which was a transparent glass wall of the box. Unexpectedly, they crashed headlong into it without any hindrance. They didn't shatter the glass, nor did they phase through into my bedroom. Instead, they vanished out of thin air. My brain worked at lightning speed. This box, it's a one-way observation port. The villagers were still praying to the sky. Cleared my throat. Divide the wheat. I have a few questions for you. Which kingdom are you in? What year is it now? Illyra quickly relayed my words to the villagers. As a result, all 4 Taituo little people had massive looks of bewilderment on their faces. The village chief scratched his head and ears. Kingdom? Year? This? Our ancestors haven't left the village for generations. We really don't know. I sighed. A bunch of illiterates. Asking them was useless. Seeing me sigh, the village chief was terrified and quickly said, "Holy Lord, please quell your anger. We don't know, but there are literate lords in the city. The clerk in the baron's castle definitely knows." He turned around and grabbed Garrick's shoulder. "Garrick, tomorrow morning, take a few strong young lads, eat more divine wheat, go to the castle territory and invite that clerk over. If he refuses to come, knock him out with a club and carry him back. We absolutely cannot let the Holy Lord down." Garrick thumped his chest loudly. "Leave it to me. Interesting. Kidnapping an NPC? This plot development is pretty hardcore." I turned off the light and slept comfortably. 7 o'clock the next morning. The first thing I did was look at the diorama box. Garrick was leading 3 strong young men, squatting at the door, ravenously devouring crushed wheat porridge mixed with tree bark, sweating profusely from eating. The girl was carrying a basket, preparing to go out and look for wild vegetables. I walked to the refrigerator and broke off a piece of crisp, plump green cabbage leaf. It was over 40 centimeters long and very juicy. I walked to the front of the box, aimed at the girl who had just stepped out of the village, and let go. The gigantic cabbage leaf floated down, blotting out the sky and the sun. In the girl's line of sight, it was a massive emerald canopy, 300 meters long and 100 meters wide, crashing down on her like Mount Tai. This girl was already accustomed to my miracles. She skillfully knelt on the ground, drew a cross in prayer, and shouted at the top of her lungs for the whole village to come share the vegetable. Once basic needs were met, the villagers immediately became active. Some sewed clothes, some molded clay, some did blacksmithing, and an old man even started carving wooden bowls. I watched with keen interest. Suddenly, Illyra brought a bucket of water into her house and shut the doors and windows tight. There was a large hole in the roof of this broken thatched cottage. My heart gave a sudden thump. I picked up the magnifying glass and aimed it at the hole. Illyra was standing on a high stack of broken wooden boxes, poking her head out to look up. Our gazes collided across dimensions. Illyra's face flushed deep red like pig liver in an instant. Terrified, she pushed open the door and ran out, heading straight for the village chief. I pricked up my ears and heard the village chief lowering his voice to scold her. "It's your blessing that the Holy Lord looks at you. Even if he asks you to go to the divine realm to be a handmaiden, you must obediently follow orders." Illyra shuddered all over, and and actually went back into the house and started untying her clothes. I immediately looked away. Not peeping is the baseline of being human. Besides, these people were starved to skin and bones. The most urgent task was to let them survive. On the other side, Garrick took the 3 strong lads and sneaked all the way to the market town outside the castle. The 4 of them hadn't seen much of the world and stood shivering by the stone bridge. Coincidentally, a middle-aged fat man wearing a decent robe was kicked and beaten out by 2 guards. The fat man howled at the top of his lungs, "Lord Baron, I advised you to open the granaries for disaster relief for your own good." In Latin, this is called culpa lata, killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Garrick's eyes lit up. That's him. The clerk the village chief mentioned, Barnaby, after being beaten, limped into an alley. He had barely taken 2 steps when Garrick blocked his path holding a large wooden club. The other 3 flanked him from behind. Terrified, Barnaby raised his hands. "Good sirs, I was kicked out just because I spoke up for you commoners. The Bible calls this pleading for the people." Garrick scratched his head. "Don't understand. Come with us to Oakhaven village."
You won't go.
"This is called going to." Bang! A heavy blow to the back of the head. Barnaby rolled his eyes back and fell straight to the ground. The young lad muttered, "This guy's talking was too annoying," couldn't hold back and knocked him. The 4 of them propped up the unconscious clerk and ran toward the outside of the city. They ran heading into a patrol squad of sheriffs. Garrick's legs trembled. Wasn't this the very tax collector who came to the village yesterday to collect taxes and was pinched into midair by me? Coincidentally, the 5 tax collectors also recognized Garrick. They thought I had sent people to monitor them, and their faces turned deathly pale from terror. Garrick stuttered, My friend is drunk," taking him to wash his face. The lead tax collector swallowed hard. "Please go ahead. About yesterday, we haven't spoken a single word." Both sides trembled like sieves and brushed past each other. Immediately afterward, they turned their backs to each other and sprinted away like crazy. At dusk, Garrick threw Barnaby at the village entrance. The sun was about to set. All Fortaituo people in the village stared intently at Barnaby. Barnaby's scalp went numb. "Everyone, let's talk this out nicely. As the proverb says, clear distinctions between gratitude and grudges." Illyra walked to the very front, tilted her ear to listen to the sky, and put on a serious expression. "Who are you? What year and month is it now?" Barnaby quickly bowed his head in a salute. "I am the former clerk, Barnaby. It is currently the year of our Lord 1315, July. This is called..." Oops, there's no proverb to summarize this. I leaned back in my chair, my body stiffening. "The year of our Lord 1315. The year the great famine of the Dark Middle Ages broke out. Continuous rainfall, total crop failures, corpses of the starved everywhere, followed closely by the preludes to war and the Black Death sweeping across Europe. This isn't a game. This is the real chaos of the Dark Ages." I ordered with a cold face, "Illyra, ask him what the current king's name is." Barnaby shook his head in terror. "The lowly one dares not call his majesty the king by his direct name. This is called treason." I got angry. "Beat him up." Illyra gave the command. The villagers picked up wooden clubs, pitchforks, and broken clay pots, surrounding Barnaby so tightly that not a drop of water could leak out. Barnaby held his head and screamed, "Edward! The current king is named Edward." I was completely confirmed. This was that dark Europe filled with starved corpses and rivers of blood. I lost the mood for amusement, turned to open my computer, and frantically searched for historical records of the medieval famine. I dropped a sentence, "Give him a bite to eat." The villagers immediately dispersed, frantically drawing crosses toward the sky in prayer. Barnaby narrowly escaped death and followed Illyra into the kitchen. As soon as he entered, he was dumbfounded. Piled in the corner were giant wheat seeds half a meter long and the size of millstones. Leaning next to them was a cabbage leaf the size of an entire wall. Barnaby threw himself at the kitchen door and screamed, "Who exactly bestowed this food?" Illyra threw up her hands. "I don't know. The Holy Lord won't say." Staying up all night, my eyes were red from staring at historical records. Keeping Fortaituo people alive is easy, but to save millions of commoners in this chaotic world, relying solely on my feeding won't work. They must be able to sustain themselves. Step 1, provide water. A humidifier's mist is too fine. In the eyes of the little people, it would be a torrential downpour that would smash their thatched cottages. I set my sights on the Tupperware plastic crisper water box on the table. Walking to the diorama box, I extended my right hand and dug fiercely into the dried mud outside the village. Rumble. Dirt flew, sand and stones swept through the air. From the little people's perspective, a giant hand blotting out the sky reached out from the clouds and tore out a massive crater 10 zhong long and 8 zhong deep from the earth barehanded. Everyone in the village ran out to watch the miracle. Barnaby tumbled and crawled in terror, his eyes practically popping out of his head. I securely placed the Tupperware box into the giant crater and smoothed the dirt around it. I picked up a cup of tap water, aimed at the water box, and poured it down. Splash. The Milky Way pouring backward. A massive water column descended from the sky, smashing heavily into the bottom of the crater, kicking up a mist that filled the sky. In a few seconds, the water box was filled to the brim, crystal clear to the bottom. The entire village was dead silent for a full minute. Barnaby stuttered out a sentence. "A miracle like Moses parting the sea." Illyra rolled her eyes at him. "Your vocabulary is a bit long this time." The villagers went crazy, jumping and laughing. "We have water, we can farm, we can take baths," I instructed Illyra. I'll fill up the water for you every day from now on. As for that clerk, tell him to go back to the castle to be an informant. If he dares to talk nonsense, knock him out." Barnaby kissed the ground toward the sky like a pounding garlic pestle, then tumbled and scrambled back toward the castle. With water, there also needed to be meat. I went out to the supermarket and bought a piece of top-quality streaky pork. I cut off a small strip and dropped it into the diorama box. Boom! A mountain of meat made of pure, perfectly marbled bacon crashed down at the village entrance. Garrick's eyes glowed green. He pulled out his machete, ready to cut the meat. I warned in a deep voice, "Your stomachs can't handle it. Distribute 1 liang, approximate 50 g per person. Hang the rest up to air dry." The villagers worried. "Without salt to cure it, it'll stink if we air dry it. You want salt, huh?" I walked into the kitchen, grabbed half a bag of table salt, aimed at Oakhaven Village, and flipped my wrist. Whoosh! An avalanche descended. Countless fist-sized, snow-white coarse salt crystals smashed down, covering their heads and faces like hail, instantly piling up a mountain of salt at the village entrance. The villagers knelt before the salt mountain, praying and wailing loudly at the same time. In the Middle Ages, salt was more expensive than life, but now there was enough to pile up a mountain. That evening, the aroma of meat soup and wheat porridge drifted from every household in the village. Garrick downed 5 large wooden bowls in one breath. With food resolved, the defense issue had to be put on the agenda. In a chaotic world, roving bandits are everywhere. Pitchforks alone couldn't protect them. I simply hailed a cab to find my friend Kai Zinzi, who ran a model business. As soon as I entered, I transferred 2,000 directly. Custom make me a 1:200 scale medieval fortified stone keep. Use 1mm thick sheet metal for the whole thing. No windows, just leave arrow slits. Kai Zinzi rolled his eyes. A castle model out of sheet metal? That lacks texture completely. Cut the crap. And install off-road tires and a motor underneath it, complete with a remote control. Kai Zinzi almost flipped the table. "Is this a castle or a tank? Sick kid's toy. They'll pay extra." "Alright boss, delivery in a month." It would take a month to build the fortress. What to do in the meantime? I took on a freelance gig doing game concept art, ground away for 5 days, and earned 3,000 bucks to subsidize my household expenses. When I finished submitting my draft and looked back at the diorama box, I was stunned. The water level in the Tupperware box had actually dropped by half a foot. That was equivalent to thousands of tons of water in the Little People's world, gone overnight. I quickly pulled up the surveillance footage. At 2 a.m., a group of ragged, emaciated refugees carrying wooden buckets sneaked into Oakhaven Village under the moonlight. They drew 2 full buckets of water and ran away. They tossed and turned for 3 trips, only disappearing right before dawn. After daybreak, the villagers also discovered the footprints. Garrick angrily picked up a wooden club. How dare they steal the divine water bestowed by the Holy Lord? Beat these thieves to death. I immediately spoke up to stop him. "Ilura, tell everyone not to pursue it. Those are refugees from outside villages who are dying of thirst. This little bit of water is nothing. I can fill it up at any time." Hearing this, the villagers' anger completely dissipated, and they knelt to praise the Lord's mercy. At 3 a.m., I ordered takeout and stared intently at the northern edge of the diorama box. Sure enough, that group of water thieves came back. The leader was a dark-faced man with a full beard. He led dozens of people, tiptoeing to the edge of the pond. Looking inside, they were all dumbfounded. The water level they had stolen down yesterday was full again. Blackbeard cursed in a low voice. "Who cares where the water comes from? Hurry up and fill up. Don't make a sound." They plunged their heads into the water and drank wildly, then desperately drew water. Watching these refugees, starved out of their original forms, my heart ached. I wanted to give them some wheat, but I was afraid the giant wheat weighing dozens of pounds of grain would scare them to death. I turned and walked to the kitchen, tearing open a bag of refined flour. I grabbed a small pinch. Modern refined flour, magnified 200 times, was still just slightly coarser spherical granules. Holding my breath, I pinched the flour with 2 fingers. While they had their heads buried drawing water, I silently reached into the box. I gently rubbed my fingertips together, and it fell onto the mud behind them. A small hill made of snow-white flour spheres appeared out of thin air. Blackbeard filled his water, picked up his carrying pole, and turned around. His movements instantly froze. The water buckets smashed onto the ground with a clang, spilling all the water. He stared dead at that flour mountain, his eyeballs practically popping out. The people next to him panicked. "Boss, the water spilled." "Shut up. Look behind you." Dozens of refugees turned their heads in unison. They were all frozen in place as if struck by an immobilization spell. Blackbeard rushed over, picked up a white sphere, and stuffed it into his mouth. "Raw flour. It's all top-grade refined white flour." He roared in a suppressed voice, trembling all over. "It must be the people from Oakhaven Village who secretly placed this here. They knew we were stealing water, and not only did they not expose us, they even gave us food." The group of people were so excited they wiped away tears. "Pour out the water. Use the wooden buckets to pack the flour. Whoever dares to spill a single grain, they'll smash his head in." The refugees madly poured the water back into the pond, wiped the wooden buckets dry, and carefully filled them with the flour spheres. Before leaving, Blackbeard put down his carrying pole and bowed deeply, placing his hand on his chest toward the direction of Oakhaven Village. "Today's generous gift, I, Rowan, shall remember. I will definitely repay it in the future." Hearing this name, my brain buzzed with a hum. Blackbeard Rowan? I quickly opened my computer and dug out the medieval historical records I had checked a few days ago. The starting point of the massive peasant uprising that swept the entire kingdom. The first fire that ignited the chaotic world. The ancestors of the rebel army that beat the king's army into repeated retreats. It was this Blackbeard man who took the lead in stealing water and was fed full by my handful of flour. I stared at the direction Rowan vanished, my scalp tingling. The progenitor of the uprising was in the neighboring village. The Lord Baron's head was about to be chopped off very soon. The flames of the peasant uprising were imminent. They were about to burn their way to Oakhaven village. The sheet metal castle would take another month to deliver. Distant water cannot quench an immediate fire. I had to immediately get some defensive gear for the village. My gaze swept frantically across the room. On the coat rack there was a rusted, curlied-up piece of scrap sheet metal. In the corner of the desk there was a box of unassembled Lego bricks. The corners of my mouth curled up. I choose you. I grabbed that piece of barbed scrap sheet metal and a few Lego bricks, strode to the diorama box, and sneered, "Brother Rowan, since the chaotic times are about to begin, they'll first give Oakhaven village some modern hardcore tech and brute force." Just as the sky began to lighten, Illyra pushed open the broken door. I pinched that piece of sheet metal I had stripped from the coat rack. It was 10 centimeters long and 0.3 millimeters thick. Aiming at the empty ground in front of her, I threw it straight down. Boom! From the little people's perspective, a supergiant black iron plate 20 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 60 centimeters thick smashed heavily onto the dry ground. The dust it kicked up was fully 3 stories high. Illyra looked up, her little face flushed red. "Holy Lord, are we eating iron plates today? I can't bite into it." I chuckled, "Glutton, this is for you to make iron armor." Blacksmith Bran ran over, circled the giant iron twice, and slapped his thigh anxiously. "Such a huge piece of iron. My broken furnace can't melt it at all. Too much nonsense." I directly reached both hands into the cloud layer. I pinched that 0.3 millimeter thin sheet metal, twisted it left, twisted it right, and gave it a hard snap. Snap! The sheet metal broke. Snap again. Snap, 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 snap. Amidst the pupil earthquakes of the entire village, 2 invisible giant hands blotting out the sky casually kneaded and tore the super iron plate that was 60 centimeters thick, snapping it into dozens of pieces of scrap iron like snapping biscuits. Divine might pressed down. The villagers' knees went soft, ready to kneel again. I ordered in a deep voice, "Hurry up and take it to Quench and Forge. Roving bandits will be running all over the place soon. Every able-bodied young person must forge a set of iron armor, take up the captured bandit swords, and defend this village to the death for me." Everyone scrambled to gather firewood to fire up the furnaces. While they were working, I brought over a basket of dusty Lego bricks. Click, click, click. My hands flew, quickly assembling a long, colorful horizontal strip. I lifted the strip, aimed it at the outskirts of Oakhaven village, and firmly pressed it into the sandy ground. I enclosed it in a closed loop, deliberately leaving an opening for the city gate. The earth trembled violently, wind and thunder rolled. The villagers looked up and were all dumbfounded. A giant, multicolored city wall, 2 zhong high, rose straight out of the ground, wrapping the entire village up tight. Illyra climbed to the top of the wall along the studs of the Lego bricks and raised her arms, shouting, "The Holy Lord has bestowed a city wall. Everyone, quickly make wooden gates and prepare to defend against thieves." The villagers enthusiastically chopped down big trees. They stripped the branches, wanting to tie them side by side to make a wooden gate. They failed very quickly. The grass ropes they twisted by hand snapped with a gentle pull. A row of logs crashed apart. Hours of work went completely down the drain. Seeing this, I directly dug out my fishing bag from under the bed. I pulled out a 0.4 fishing line. This thing's diameter was only 0.1 millimeters. Magnified 200 times inside the box, it was a thick 2-centimeter hawser. I snipped off a section and casually tossed it into the village. "Tie it with this." A transparent, crystal-like long rope descended from the sky. The villagers used knives to cut it. Dull blades sawed away frantically, and they sweat bullets from exhaustion before barely managing to cut it. Several strong men pulled desperately from both ends, but it didn't budge an inch. It's stronger than hemp, ropes thicker than an arm. Could this be the noose of an angel? Will we be condemned by heaven if we cut it? I scolded. "Stop being so superstitious all day. That's my toy. Get to work." With the divine rope, 2 solid wood main gates, 2 zhong high, were tied together in an instant. The village's hardware was up to standard. The software had to catch up. I told Garrick to take people into the city to find that clerk Barnaby, who was fired by the Baron, to get me some technical talent back here. The moment Garrick set foot into the territory's market town, the entrance of the Baron's castle exploded. Barnaby was grabbing a familiar guard to strike up a conversation. The guard lowered his voice and sneered. "Lord Baron sent people to Clearwater Town to collect taxes. There was no grain, so they directly robbed the serfs of their winter wheat seeds." Barnaby's scalp instantly went numb. Robbing wheat seeds? That's the lifeblood of the serfs. There was a ruthless man in Clearwater Town named Rowan. This was definitely going to cause a rebellion. He took off running back to his courtyard, running right into Garrick, who had just arrived at his door. Upon hearing that Oakhaven village was building iron armor to defend against thieves, Barnaby instantly realized. The Holy Lord had long predicted that Rowan would rebel. Without a second of hesitation, he shoved his wife, daughter, maidservant, and manservant all to Garrick. "Take them to Oakhaven village to seek the Holy Lord's protection. Flee, quickly." Garrick was simple-minded. Obediently, he took the women and children and turned back to sprint wildly out of the city. The moment they stepped out of the city gate, on the hillside in the northwest corner of the market town. Hundreds of men with their faces smeared with charcoal charged out, brandishing pitchforks and flails. The one taking the lead was precisely Blackbeard Rowan, heartless tyrant, stealing our wheat seeds. Who dares to follow me and charge into the castle? Idare, charge. The flames of rebellion were thoroughly ignited. Hundreds of refugees flattened the city gates like mad dogs, pouncing straight at the castle. The veteran guards defending the gates were so scared they stripped off their surcoats and lay face down in the stinking ditch playing dead. The entire market town devolved into a living hell. Barnaby didn't run. He took off his decent robes, changed into a manservant's tattered linen clothes, messed his hair into a bird's nest, and taking advantage of the citywide chaos, hugged the base of the walls and sneaked into the dark artisan street. He knocked open the door of Cedric, the most awesome master blacksmith in the city. The rebel army outside is killing the nobles. Come with me to seek refuge with a super major lord. I guarantee you'll shed your serf status and become a freeman. Cedric had been a lowly blacksmith for the lord for generations. Upon hearing he could wash himself clean, his eyes turned red. Let's do it. Taking advantage of the citywide hacking and slashing, the two slipped out of the market town and headed straight for Oakhaven village. On the other side, Garrick took Barnaby's plump wife, Lady Beatrice, trekking on foot. This plump lady lived a pampered life and complained internally the whole way. When she stood panting at the village entrance, she froze on the spot. A colorful city wall reaching to the heavens, air-dried bacon strips stretching as far as the eye could see, and a large, crystal-clear pool full to the brim. Illyra casually shoved 2 half-meter-long white wheat grains and crystal-like giant salt into her hands. Take it and eat, a gift from the Holy Lord. The plump lady trembled uncontrollably in fear. Coincidentally, a few villagers in the distance were working together to erect the city gates. Their feet slipped, and the 1,000-pound solid wood gate was about to crush the old village chief flat. Sitting in front of my screen, I reached out my left hand and gently supported the bottom of the door panel with my index finger. The door panel instantly defied physics, hovering dead still in midair. Illyra shouted. The Holy Lord supported it, quickly set it straight. Lady Beatrice looked at the miracle performed by the invisible giant hand. Her knees went soft, and she fell to her knees onto the muddy ground, frantically drawing crosses on her chest. The Almighty Holy Lord manifests. This lowly believer is blessed for 3 lifetimes. This noblewoman, who had believed in Catholicism for half her life and went to church every day, instantly became my most fanatic zealot. The sun set in the west. Barnaby led the blacksmith Cedric running into Oakhaven village. Cedric looked at the hard labor wildly devouring meat soup and wheat porridge from wooden bowls, looked at the towering, colorful city walls, his eyes shining. This major lord's power was too terrifying. Holding a bowl of pickled cabbage and shredded pork rice noodles, I sat outside the box looking down at them. Cedric, can you build firearms? I asked through Illyra. Cedric thumped his chest, extremely arrogant. This lowly one worked in the royal armory since childhood. Things like hand cannons are a piece of cake. Whatever the great lord wants, I can forge it. Bragging pretty loud, I put down my chopsticks and took out a printed A5 paper. Aiming at the empty space behind the city gate, I let go. Whoosh! A white canopy larger than the pond crashed down. The fierce wind rolled up dust, scaring the villagers into grabbing their bowls and running. Printed clearly on the paper was a precision blueprint of a modern breech-loading rifle. Even the parts disassembly diagram was crystal clear. This was the ultimate weapon I asked someone to find that a blacksmith could realistically handforge. Breech loading, no need for complex rifling. Cedric climbed up the Tuzanghai colorful city wall, looked down at this giant painting, and cold sweat instantly soaked his back. This musket is too precise. This lowly one cannot guarantee to be able to forge it. I smiled. No rush, it'll give you a few years to slowly hammer it out. Get it done, and I guarantee your dreams come true. Cedric gritted his teeth and shouted, Great Lord, this lowly one is willing to sell my life, but this lowly one is bold enough to want to see your true face with my own eyes. Illyra pointed outside the wall. Jump down and you'll know. Cedric closed his eyes and leaped off the Tuzanghai wall. I flipped my palm and caught him steadily. He slid through midair in the palm of my hand, experiencing firsthand what a true angelic reception was like. When he landed, this blacksmith fell straight to his knees, slamming them flat against the ground. This lowly one will spill his brains and blood on the ground. I will definitely forge it. I picked up an empty Pepsi can on the table and cut it in half with scissors. I cut out a doorway, turned it over, and slapped it down onto the empty space in the village. Bang! A loud noise, the earth trembled. A blue metal roundhouse with reversed English letters rose from the ground. Live here for now, they'll swap it for a big stone house for you later. The villagers were numb to watching it. Lady Beatrice kissed the mud until her forehead was almost broken. Night fell. I turned off the desk lamp and browsed forums by the light of the screen. Suddenly, noisy sounds came from the edge of the box. Hundreds of people holding torches and pushing wooden carts stopped outside the Lego City wall. The dark-faced man in the lead was exactly Blackbeard Rowan. He had just chopped off the Baron's head and looted the castle's granary. On his escape route, he intentionally made a detour to repay my kindness for the flour. Rowan shouted at the top of the wall, Brothers of Oakhaven Village, I brought 2 carts of grain to return the favor. I frowned. Accepting grain from nobles now would mean getting tainted by the stench of rebellion. The fragile Oakhaven Village couldn't withstand the encirclement and suppression of the king's army. Without me needing to give the order, Barnaby directly climbed up the wall. Opening his mouth, he spoke like an old veteran of the underworld. Leader Rowan, we appreciate the thought. You are fleeing for your life, These 2 carts of grain are your capital to stay alive. They mean little to us, but mean everything to you. Keep them." Hearing this, the brothers beside Rowan chimed in to dissuade him. Rowan was a straightforward man. He placed his hand on his chest in salute. "The kindness of your noble village, I, Rowan, shall remember. May God bless you. Farewell." Before leaving, Barnaby suddenly asked, "What happened to the female relatives in the castle?" Rowan's body stiffened. He glared angrily at the brothers beside him and walked away full of shame. "In these chaotic times of war, I could figure out with my toes what kind of fate befell noble women falling into a crowd of rioting peasants." After the rebel soldiers left, Barnaby cursed the villagers out terribly. "With such a high wall, there isn't even anyone standing guard and lighting torches at night. You wouldn't even know if roving bandits snuck up and slit your throats." The village chief looked deeply troubled. "Lighting torches requires oil. We can't even afford to eat. Where would we get oil?" Barnaby sneered. "Pray to the Holy Lord. Tomorrow morning, everyone holds mass. Whatever you ask for, you shall have." Hearing this, I thought the flattery was spot on. I turned around and grabbed a large bottle of sunflower oil from the kitchen. Just as I was about to pour it into a mineral water bottle cap and hand it in, Lady Beatrice suddenly jumped out. She pointed at the noses of everyone in the village and cursed, "A bunch of country bumpkins like pagans. You are too disrespectful to the Holy Lord. Even a priest praying requires fasting, bathing, and ringing the church bell. You beg the Holy Lord, yet you build no shrines, make no holy statues, light no candles, and don't even ring a bell? You just open your mouths and ask for freebies? Where are the rules?" The villagers were scolded until their faces were red, unable to lift their heads. Lady Beatrice took over command of the entire village on the spot. "Tomorrow, everyone changes into clean clothes. Lady Illyra will dress up nicely. Blacksmith, don't sleep tonight. Forge a large copper bell overnight. Tomorrow we run the full holy ritual." My hand holding the oil bottle paused in midair, almost bursting into laughter. The formalism of medieval religious fanaticism was really fucking useful sometimes. The little people's voices were too soft. If I didn't pay attention normally, I couldn't hear them clearly at all. If they rang a large bell every time they wanted to find me, wouldn't that be equivalent to sending me a WeChat notification sound? I gleefully put down the sunflower oil bottle. "Alright, I won't give it tonight. Tomorrow morning, you'll see what kind of show you guys put on for me." I tightened the cap of the oil bottle, leaned back in my chair, stared at the firelight of the blacksmith shop inside the diorama box, and smiled. "It wasn't in vain that I found you technical talent. Tomorrow, let me hear just how loud this first medieval exclusive divine notification sound will be." Early the next morning, I was still dreaming when I was jolted awake by a burst of clang banging sounds from broken copper and scrap iron. Rubbing my eyes, I looked into the diorama box. Good heavens, all 48 people in the village had lined up in neat formations of knightly squires and serfs. Illyra had been dressed up by that devout Lady Beatrice to look like Joan of Arc descending to earth. Wearing a pure white linen robe and a flower crown on her head, she absolutely stood in the center position. If she were in the modern world, this level of beauty would have Hollywood talent scouts handing her business cards on the street. Holding a wooden cup, she toasted the heavens and sprinkled it on the earth. She knelt on both knees, put her hands together, recited a long string of stuttering Latin hymns, and finally shouted at the top of her lungs. This humble believer is bold enough to ask for the deity's honorable name. I yawned and casually gave my real name, Silas. Upon hearing this name, Lady Beatrice trembled with excitement. This was clearly the name of an ancient prophet. She took the lead in kissing the ground and roaring, "Praise the almighty holy Lord Silas." The whole village followed suit, drawing crosses in unison and prostrating on the ground. "Alright, your buddy is now the holy Lord." Illyra continued to report, "Defense against thieves requires lighting torches all night, begging the holy Lord to bestow lamp oil." I turned around, picked up the sunflower oil from the kitchen, filled a mineral water bottle cap, and gently placed it into the box. In their eyes, this was a supermassive oil pool 10 feet in diameter and over half a person deep. The pure aroma of modern vegetable oil rushed straight to their heads. That simpleton Garrick drooled all over the ground and wanted to down the oil pool right then and there, but was kicked flying by the village chief. I didn't let everyone distribute it randomly. I directly designated that this pool of oil be handed over to the clerk Barnaby to manage. This old fox understood my meaning instantly. Oakhaven Village was currently a loose sheet of sand. It needed him to enforce discipline. I struck while the iron was hot, tossing down a few handfuls of flour spheres. Use this to go get some people. Barnaby's methods were absolutely ruthless. He borrowed a stone mill, ground the microscopically giant flour spheres entirely into normal powder, and packed it into burlap sacks. Holding this stuff, he strolled over to several nearby abandoned villages that had been drained of their able-bodied youth by bandits. By dusk, this guy swaggered into the village with his head held high, followed by a full 102 refugees with faces the color of vegetables from starvation. The village population skyrocketed instantly. Barnaby immediately displayed incredibly strong management skills, shouting at the top of his lungs to lay down the rules. "Those who know how to forge, you get 2 extra scoops of flour a day. Go hang with Cedric, masons and woodcarvers. Take people and go build the holy sanctuary of St. Silas for me. Building a sanctuary requires a divine statue." The 2 woodcarvers begged Illyra to describe what I looked like. I simply took off the glass cover and leaned my face close to look down. Illyra was completely mesmerized. When relaying it to the carvers, she forcibly added 3 layers of beauty filters to me. The clay statue they molded was handsome, elegant, elegant, and possessed a solemn treasure-like appearance. Its looks at least 30% higher than me in person. This craftsmanship was quite incredible. A thought struck me. I opened my computer printer, shrunk printed a 3-centimeter pattern of Aragorn from the Lord of the Rings, holding his holy sword. I cut it out and threw it into the box. Use wood and carve this out for me 1:1 based on this. Just as the arrangements here were finished, the alarm outside the village sounded. The territory's sheriff, Sir Derek, leading over 100 defeated remnant soldiers, followed the escape route of the rebel Rowan and groped his way to Oakhaven village. This bunch of bastards had just had their lair taken out by the rioting serfs and were worrying about having nowhere to vent. As a result, when they looked up and bumped into the Tuzanghai Lego colorful city wall on the outskirts of the village, they were dumbfounded on the spot. In this desolate wilderness, where did such a huge magical fortress come from? Is the witchcraft of Rowan's bunch of rebel bandits this terrifying now? Barnaby, deeply versed in the art of fooling people, greeted them with a beaming smile, pretending to be blind. Lord Knight, what city wall? This is clearly a refugee village. Sir Derek drew his sword, pointed at the Tuzanghai Lego bricks in front of him, and cursed loudly. Do you think I'm blind? You can't see a wall this big. Sitting outside the box, I sneered, took out my phone, pressed it close to the glass of the diorama box, clicked on an audio clip of a witch's miserable laugh from a medieval horror movie, and maxed out the volume. Wahahaha! The shrill ghost laugh exploded like thunder behind the backs of the 100 or so fully armed soldiers. Sir Derek was so scared he dropped his sword, leading his subordinates to abruptly turn around and stare dead at the gloomy forest behind them. Now's the time. My hands turned into afterimages reaching into the box, pulled away the Lego city wall, yanked out the Tupperware water pool, flipped away the Tinkin metal house. Within 10 seconds, the village instantly turned back into a desolate, flat, yellow sandy ground. Sir Derek found no witch behind him and turned back, suspicious and uncertain. The next second, his entire body stiffened in place as if struck by lightning. His lips trembled frantically. The fortress? Where's the fortress? A wall that big. It was just here. The corners of Barnaby's mouth split open into an eerie arc, looking exactly like a believer subjected to demonic whispers. Lord Knight, it must be that you've been exterminating bandits for consecutive days and had your mind bewildered by the witches in the woods. Where is there a wall here? How about coming into the village to rest? Sir Derek looked at the villagers kneeling all over the ground drawing crosses, recalled that burst of witches' laughter just now, and was scared out of his wits. There are demons. God protect us. This guy tumbled and crawled onto his warhorse, taking his 100+ soldiers and fleeing into the desert like crazy. After they ran far away, with a wave of my large hand, the Lego wall, water pool, and house once again descended from the sky, firmly smashing back into their original places. The newly joined refugees looked at the scene, knelt on the ground frantically kissing the mud, their faith directly maxed out. A few days later, the midday temperature in midsummer approached 40 degrees Celsius. A refugee who was building the sanctuary under the scorching sun suddenly plopped down, foaming at the mouth, passing out from heatstroke. I turned around, pulled open the freezer compartment of the refrigerator, pried out a small piece of crushed ice, put it into a mineral water bottle cap, and poured it full of cola. I placed it steadily into the village. A large brown pool, several meters in diameter, with a giant iceberg stuck in it, bubbling with cold air, appeared in the village. What is this? It's even bubbling black. Illyra shouted. The magical nectar bestowed by the Holy Lord. It cures all diseases. Everyone crowded around and drank wildly. The ice-cold carbonated bubbles exploded in their stomachs. The whole village was thrilled. The villager playing dead from heatstroke scrambled up and hugged the edge of the pool, chugging fiercely. That strongman Garrick was even more addicted. Carrying an axe, he charged up the mountain like crazy, chopped a pile of top-grade raw logs, dragged them back to the village, and didn't ask for food, only wanting to exchange them for a mouthful of black nectar. Laughing and cursing, I drew a syringe full of cola, dripped it into the wash basin he made himself, filling it directly to the brim. That evening, the two carvers knelt on the ground holding the Aragorn wood carving. It was done. I picked up a straw, sucked up a few drops of modern paint, and dripped them in front of them. In their eyes, these few drops of paint were several high-grade paintballs 10 centimeters in diameter. Modern chemical products had maxed out color saturation, completely delivering a multidimensional crushing blow to medieval natural tree sap paint. The painted Aragorn wood carving was incredibly lifelike. Even the scales of the armor glinted coldly. I pinched this small wood carving, which was only 1 centimeter high, shoved it into my pocket, and headed straight for my old friend Kai Zinzai's model shop. Old Kai looked through a magnifying glass and his scalp tingled. This is a fucking micro-carving artwork. The craftsmanship is unmatched. He took a few high-definition macro photos, posted them on his WeChat Moments, and priced it at $8,888. Within 5 minutes, an appreciative European rich guy instantly bought it and paid. Old Kai slapped his thigh, shouting that he sold it too cheap, and immediately messaged the rich guy privately. Half an hour later, Old Kai sent a WeChat message. Silas, the rich guy offered 1.2 million. He wants a custom 1mm micro-carving of the Archangel St. Michael. He wants to put it in a transparent cross pendant and flip it at an auction house for millions in massive profit. Staring at that string of zeros on the screen, My heart rate accelerated crazily. Take it right now. A 1mm micro carving? An impossible task for modern humans. But for me, I just needed to have the little people in the box carve a Tumaturai, life-size divine statue. This business was simply a cross-dimensional crushing strike. Enrich, carrying the deposit, I swept through the supermarket for a large piece of top-tier pork tenderloin, taking wide strides home. Cutting off a small piece, I dropped it into the empty space in Oakhaven Village. A fresh, redand white mountain of meat rose from the ground. I sent down a divine decree. Tonight, the whole village eats meat, 2 scoops per person. The extra dozens of pounds are all rewarded to the 2 sculptors. The entire village boiled over. The sculptors hugged the giant meat that was several sizes larger than themselves, crying snot and tears, and set up a fire on the spot in the empty space to smoke bacon. The greasy, savory aroma of meat drifted through the whole village, stimulating the nerves of every refugee. Human nature is just like this. Only when there is hope will people desperately climb upwards. Amidst the smoke and fire of this smoked meat, a towering, majestic miniature Gothic building was completely finished. St. Silas Cathedral was officially completed. I couldn't wait to cast my gaze toward that small sanctuary. It was time to see just what dimension of power of faith this group of fanatic zealots could produce for me. The year of our Lord 1315, the eve of the harvest festival. All the villagers changed into clean linen clothes, lining up in neat square formations. Illyra, braving the hot weather, dressed in flowing white robes and wearing heavy makeup, knelt in front of the most luxurious building in the whole village. Holding the Holy Grail, she toasted the heavens and sprinkled the earth. After reciting a whole stuttering psalm, she waved her large hand. Ring the bell! Clang, clang, clang. The melodious sound of the copper bell rippled outwards. To be fair, those 2 blacksmiths hadn't managed to forge proper iron armor, but they certainly made this bell sound decent. The villagers lined up to enter the church, kissing the holy armor of my divine statue and making wishes. An old farmer begged pitifully. I begged the Holy Lord to bless us with favorable weather next year and plump wheat ears. I was amused. This matter was under my jurisdiction. I ordered Illyra, tell him, amen, it is granted. Hearing this, the old farmer rushed out the door in wild joy, crying and laughing. The Holy Lord has granted it. 3 years. We can finally plant crops. Seeing this, the people lining up behind him went crazy, their eyes turning red as they squeezed forward. I begged the Holy Lord to bless my family with a few more bushels of oats. I waved my large hand. Granted, all granted. Worst comes to worst, he'll sprinkle some fertilizer for you later. Right during this sacred and solemn moment, the clerk Barnaby sidled up to the divine statue and prayed with shifty eyes. I begged the Holy Lord for a blessing. I want the thing down there to grow a bit bigger and last a bit longer, so from now on, like a bull in heat, my face darkened entirely. Tell him to get the hell out of here immediately. Holding back her laughter, Illyra relayed the exact words. Barnaby scurried away holding his head, and the whole village erupted in roaring laughter. Just as everyone was having fun, the sentry on the city wall suddenly rang the alarm bell desperately. Someone is coming. There are a lot of people outside. I straightened up and looked into the box. Limited by the field of view, I could only see 500 meters around the village. But the villagers, standing on the city wall, could see for several miles out. Soon, a tragic chase scene rushed into my line of sight. A large group of refugees dragging their children were running wildly, crying for their fathers and mothers, followed closely by a large number of forest bandits wielding battle axes and longswords. Swords flashed and blood shadowed. With swift strokes, the slower refugees were chopped down onto the ground, blood spurting. The villagers had never seen such a battle array, and their legs went soft from fear. Barnaby roared at the top of his lungs, "Grab your weapons! Pot lids, pitchforks, logging axes, everyone get on the wall for me." At the very front ran a carriage, bumping its way to the bottom of the city gate. The one driving was a middle-aged noble wearing a velvet cape, looking up and shouting anxiously, "Please open the gates and let us in to hide." Barnaby poked his head out and recognized him. "Lord Viscount Eldrick? Quick, open the gates and let them in." The winch turned, and the wooden doors had just opened a crack when the noble's carriage plunged into the village. But the refugees following behind the carriage were practically heel-to-heel with the bandits. Opening the doors at this moment meant the bandits would definitely take the opportunity to charge in and slaughter. Barnaby was sweating profusely, caught in a dilemma of human nature. Close the doors? The refugees die. Don't close them? The whole village dies. I sneered. With me here, what human nature is there to test? I took a deep breath, puffed up my cheeks, and aimed at the mud outside the city. Whoosh! I blew out a breath fiercely. A Category 12 gale rolled up, dust filling the sky, instantly pulling up a sandstorm that blotted out the sun and sky between the refugees and the bandits. The bandits were blinded by the sand and couldn't see directions at all. The refugees only needed to put their heads down and run forward. In just a dozen seconds, the distance was pulled apart. The refugees swarmed inside the city walls, and the large doors slammed shut tightly with a boom. The Viscount jumped out of the carriage, wiped his cold sweat, his heart still fluttering with fear. My White Raven manor was breached by this bunch of rebel thieves. This is just a small band. There's a main force of hundreds or thousands behind them. Barnaby was shocked. A scale of 1,000 1,000? Don't Sir Direct's government troops care? The Viscount gnashed his teeth. The king's army is slacking off. They say this bunch of refugees will starve to death on their own by next spring after looting. They aren't sending troops at all. The strongman Garrick next to them was dumbfounded. He glared with his bull-like eyes and cursed. Looting until next spring is fine? Then I should just grab a fucking sword and go out to rob too. Illyra slapped the back of his head. Wake up! Do you want to be smashed into a meat pie by the Holy Lord? Just as they were talking, a clamor arose outside the city. A bandit leader carrying a two-handed greatsword jumped out, pointed at the city wall, and clamored. Which noble built this broken fortress? I give you half Anshishan an hour to hand over 10 sacks of flour. Otherwise, when the city falls, even the dogs will be hanged. The Viscount had seen the world after all, and he suggested in a lowered voice, a wise man doesn't fight against impossible odds. If the village has grain, give him 10 sacks to buy off disaster. Charge this money to White Raven Manor's account. Barnaby ignored him, turned to look at Illyra, waiting for me to speak. Staring at that bunch of shriveled bandits who couldn't even get enough to eat, I let out a sneering laugh. Illyra, tell them, fuck compromise. Illyra took a deep breath, sank her chi to her Danshan lower abdomen. The Holy Lord says, fuck compromise. Garrick was the first to react, raising his axe and laughing wildly. Right, fuck compromise. Over 100 people in the entire village plopped to their knees, drew crosses toward the sky, and roared in unison. Fuck compromise! The sound wave shook the heavens, deafening the bandits outside the city. The Viscount was also dumbfounded, grabbing Barnaby. Is this heretical witchcraft of yours? What proper Catholic shouts this slogan? Barnaby chuckled. The sandstorm that saved you just now. Did you feel the wind? That was the Holy Lord casting a spell. The Viscount realized what it meant and suddenly shuddered violently. Seeing Oakhaven village giving no face, the thieves ran to get reinforcements. I had to get this bunch of newbie villagers some ranged heavy firepower. I turned and rushed downstairs, heading straight for the toy store opposite my apartment complex. Among a pile of flashy toys, I locked my eyes onto a box of miniature plastic trebuchets in the corner. They were only 3 centimeters long and wide, rebounding via plastic elasticity. Boss, how much? $1 each. Take the whole box of 50. They'll give it to you for 25. Scanned the code, paid, took the goods. Back home, the whole village was in full mobilization, boiling oil and moving stones. I cleared my throat. Illyra, tell everyone I'm issuing weapons. The people in the whole village immediately stopped their work, looking up at the sky with fanatic eyes. The Viscount thought this bunch of people had gone crazy and was just about to mock them. Pinching a green plastic trebuchet, I parted the clouds and slowly lowered it. In the Viscount's eyes, a low cloud broke open and a 5-color giant siege beast, 2 zhong long and 2 zhong wide, carrying a massive counterweight, crashed to the ground with world-destroying oppressive force. Yellow sand filled the sky. The Viscount's eyes almost popped out. A tray, trebuchet, this shape, this material. It's truly a weapon of war from heaven. Illyra directed the blacksmith Cedric. Take a hammer and stand next to the mechanism. When I say strike, you smash. I picked up a stone that was the size of a millstone to the little people and gently placed it into the pouch of the trebuchet. Strike. Cedric swung his large iron hammer in a full circle and smashed it hard onto the plastic mechanism. Bang! The plastic mechanism sprang open, and the giant throwing arm rose from the ground with a whoosh. The giant stone tore through the sky, carrying a piercing shriek through the air, directly flying over the city wall and smashing outside the city. Boom! The giant stone landed, instantly smashing a bandit into meat paste. Its momentum undiminished, it forcibly plowed a bloody path through the enemy array. The thief soldiers instantly exploded, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. The villagers boiled over. This firepower was too fierce. I grinned. Fun, right? Let me give you some more. I grabbed a handful of trebuchets and lined them up behind the city wall in a row, deploying 20 of them consecutively. Red, green, blue, an array of colorful siege engines was fully formed. The Viscount completely yielded, his calves trembling crazily, and joined the villagers in kissing the ground and shouting amen. At dusk, the takeout had just arrived. A thunderous battle cry came from inside the box. The main force of the thief army, over 1,000 people, was bearing down upon the borders. Although this group of people was sallow and emaciated, they had killed people and seen blood. The vicious glare of ruthless bandits seeped from their bones. The leader carried a two-handed greatsword and roared wildly, "Charge! Breach the city and loot the grain." Over 1,000 people swarmed forward carrying scaling ladders and battering rams. The villagers shivered in terror. The Viscount drew his long sword, standing on the city wall and screaming, "2 blacksmiths! Strike!" Cedric and Bran swung their iron hammers, outputting crazily against the mechanisms of the 20 trebuchets. Bang! 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 20 giant stones rose into the air, smashing into the enemy camp like a meteor shower. Boom! 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 Every time a giant stone landed, flesh and blood flew everywhere. The bandits fell in swaths like mowed wheat. The ruthless bandits in the front row stared against the arrow rain, charged to the base of the wall, and set up scaling ladders to climb up. The guards of White Raven Manor fought to the death firing arrows, and the thief army also shot back upwards. Dozens of cold arrows shot towards the top of the wall. I couldn't bear to see my own believers suffer a loss, so I stretched out my palm and blocked above the city wall. Ding ding clank clank. The bandits' sharp arrows hit my palm without piercing a single hair. They were all bounced off by skin that had been thickened 200 times. This is called a physical level shield. The The thief soldiers couldn't see my hand at all and thought the city wall came with a magical barrier, scaring them out of their wits. Under the city wall, pot after pot of boiling vegetable oil was poured down. It scalded the thief soldiers until they shrieked wildly. Suddenly, a bandit stepped on a scaling ladder and flipped onto the wall. This guy was extremely fierce, wrapped in thick studded leather armor. A villager thrust a pitchfork at him, but couldn't even pierce the skin. With a backhand strike, he chopped off the pitchfork and pounced toward Garrick with a hideous grin. Unable to dodge in time, Garrick took a sword strike hard to his chest. Clang! Sparks flew. Garrick, wearing the sheet metal plate armor I provided, was completely unharmed. The bandit was stunned, gritted his teeth, and swung a backhand slash at Garrick's neck. My eyelids twitched. Daring to touch my capable general? I extended 2 fingers, accurately reaching into midair, and firmly clamped down on that broadsword halfway through its swing. The bandit's face turned red, using all his might, but the great sword remained completely motionless. In the eyes of bystanders, this sword seemed to be welded dead by the air. Allura shouted, "Garrick, the Holy Lord has locked him down for you. Strike." Garrick woke up as if from a dream, swung his large logging axe, and swept away 1,000 troops. The heavy and powerful axe blade directly split open the leather armor, hacking the bandit and his armor down to the ground, blood spraying wildly. Garrick raised his axe and roared wildly, "The Holy Lord protects us." Outside the city, the thief army leader suddenly realized something was wrong. The Thou Sandmen army behind him had been crushed into collapse by the trebuchets, and every single one of them had run away. Only he was left leading dozens of remnant defeated soldiers fighting a lone battle. "Retreat, quick, retreat." The leader's courage broke. He turned around and took off running. The Viscount picked up a bow and arrow, aimed at the back of the thief leader's heart, and fired an arrow. But his aim was too poor, missing by 108,000 miles. The atmosphere at the scene reached peak awkwardness. Trying to run? Did you ask me? I raised my right hand, aimed at the thief leader's escape route. With 5 fingers spread, I slapped down hard. Rumble. The color of the world changed, and the earth shook. On the mud outside the city, a giant palm print several meters deep was instantly caved in. The thief leader and the dozen or so confidants beside him didn't even let out a scream, instantly turning into a pool of meat pie exactly in the center of the palm. Dead silence across the whole scene. The wind and sand dispersed, leaving a massive divine palm print engraved on the earth. Visual impact maxed out. The Viscount could no longer care about any noble dignity. His knees gave way, and bringing his wife, children, and elderly, he lay flat on the ground, frantically drawing crosses. Divine punishment. This is true divine punishment. Just at the moment of fanatic prostration across the whole scene, I suddenly saw points of light like fireflies floating up from the body of every single little person. Over 300 light spots rose into the air, all melting into the glass walls of the diorama box. The next second, the entire diorama box erupted with dazzling golden light. On the edge of the box, 5 physical buttons appeared out of thin air: east, south, west, north, center. Beside them floated a line of glowing English words: Salvation Index 325. My breathing grew rapid, my heart beating like a drum. With trembling fingers, I pressed the east button. The image inside the diorama box panned smoothly to the left. The fog of war in the east dispersed, and the field of view physically expanded outward by 500 meters. I pressed north. The field of view pushed north, and I even saw the dark forest where Garrick chopped trees. I understood. The higher the salvation index, the larger the field of view. I rubbed my hands excitedly and pulled the field of view back to the village center. The village was cleaning up the battlefield. A noble guard had his legs scalded by boiling oil and was rolling on the ground in pain. I smiled slightly, pulled open a drawer, and dug out a tube of modern imported burn ointment. I squeezed out a tiny bit smaller than a sesame seed. Come on, let God's mercy reward you with something good again. Picking up that insignificant bit of ointment on my fingertip, I slowly lowered it, looking at the fanatic believers in the box, and chuckled softly. Since the field of view is open, then on this chaotic chessboard of dark Europe, I'm gonna properly place a couple of pieces. This burn ointment on my fingertip wasn't even as big as a sesame seed, but falling into Illura's eyes, it was a massive, milky white giant, unidentified object emitting a strange fragrance. She caught it with both hands, almost failing to hold it and nearly smashing it onto the ground. The plump Lady Beatrice next to her was quick-eyed and deft-handed, supporting it with one hand, shouting, "The holy medicine of heaven. Quick, fetch a silver communion chalice to hold it." This plump noblewoman looked solemn, offered the ointment into the chalice, and sealed the opening tightly with parchment. She only let Illura use the tiny bit of ointment residue left on her hands to casually wipe a couple of times on the scalded, blistered guard. Brutal, too brutal. The guard gasped in pain, but barely 2 seconds after it was applied, the wound stopped hurting. A cool sensation instantly subdued the fiery, burning blisters. The guard kissed the cross in wild joy. Viscount Eldrick of White Raven Manor stood by watching the whole process, directly dumbfounded. Previously, he had still suspected this was some sort of heretical black magic scam. Now, the true god manifested, and the medicine cured the disease instantly. As a lord full of chivalric spirit, his knees went soft, and he yielded completely. It was completely dark. I had Illura call the 3 corps managers Barnaby Barnaby, Lady Beatrice, and the Viscount into the cathedral. Candlelight flickered. I brought my face close to the clouds, my voice reaching directly into the sanctuary. This is a glorious and arduous holy war mission. I want to save the people of the world. But listen closely, I only save the devout innocents. Those who commit crimes and evil deeds, I directly bring down divine punishment. Killing thugs is saving good people. The Viscount shivered upon hearing this. I continued to order, Viscount, you will return to White Raven Manor tomorrow. Go outside and look at your carriage. The Viscount tumbled and scrambled out the cathedral doors. Lifting the carriage curtain to look, his eyeballs almost popped out. The carriage was half filled with refined flower spheres larger than fists. Take this flower, go back and relieve the serfs in the surrounding areas, and rebuild White Raven Manor. The Viscount bowed deeply towards the sky, completely becoming my die-hard fan. I then instructed the plump lady, prepare potion bottles tomorrow. I will bestow upon you various holy medicines. You return to the castle market town to heal the sick and poor commoners. Remember, saving lives is not to let them take up swords to kill people. The lady trembled with excitement, thumping her chest to guarantee the completion of the mission. Early the next morning, the Viscount's family of 3 set off in their carriage. Inside was entirely refined white flour. Bumping all the way, by the time they arrived, the family of 3 had all turned into white flour ghosts. Relying on the grain I gave and the gold coins hidden in his own cellar, Viscount Eldrick quickly recruited mercenaries, and White Raven Manor was resurrected on the spot. Over at Oakhaven Village, I took a closer look, and the blacksmiths Cedric and Bran were being scolded by the clerk Barnaby, pointing at their noses. It's been over half a month. The thieves have fought their way to our doors, and you only made 2 sets of plate armor? Have you been eating the Holy Lord's food for nothing? Cedric felt terribly wrong. Lord Barnaby, it's really not our fault. Armor can't be all iron. Inside, one must wear a thick arming doublet to connect it, otherwise, the iron armor will chafe a person to death. The village has no cotton or linen at all. Short on cotton? That's easy. I turned and pulled open my wardrobe, dug out a worn-out old padded jacket, and plucked out a wad of long staple Xinjiang cotton through a hole. I casually tossed it into the box. A wad of snow-white cotton half the size of a house crashed down in front of the blacksmith shop. Barnaby threw himself on it and pulled a handful, shouting excitedly, "The holy cotton of heaven! So white, so fine, so long." I stared at this wad of cotton, and a thought suddenly flashed through my mind. The cotton grew larger, but the fibers inside didn't become thicker. The little people could still spin and weave it normally. This showed that when things at the microscopic level were put into the box, their volume remained unchanged, but their quantity increased proportionally. The women of the whole village boiled over, scrambling to claim cotton to take home to spin thread and weave cloth. Lady Beatrice was going to return to the market town in 2 days to preach and dispense medicine. Barnaby squatted on the ground, looking miserable. With my wife gone, what about my daughter reading and studying? Trying to invite a teaching scholar to this poor backwater is as hard as ascending to the heavens. Those scholars who know Latin have arrogant bones and will not bow their waists for 5 bushels of oats. Arrogant bones? Won't bow? I pulled open a drawer and dug out a thick $9.99 pure silver necklace I bought during my Chuyunibiu phase years ago. I took pliers, cut off a silver ring 1 centimeter in diameter, and threw it into the box. Clang! A massive silver ring, a head taller than a person, smashed down in front of Barnaby. Shining with silver light, it blinded everyone in the village. I sneered. Ask him, will he bow his waist now? Barnaby swallowed hard. He will break his own waist with parchment. I took the pliers and cut the silver ring into fist-sized pieces. Take the silver pieces to invite him. If he doesn't come, smash 1 piece. If he still doesn't come, smash another piece. If he still doesn't come after smashing 2 pieces, turn around and leave. I guarantee he will run after you crying, begging you to hire him. Barnaby knelt on the ground, wildly shouting the Holy Lord's generosity. Early the next morning, Barnaby took his wife, along with the sculptor, Garrick, and a dozen other able-bodied young men, carrying bags and bundles out of Oakhaven Village, heading straight for the territory market town. Now the outside world was in the chaos of war. The group walked nervously for a dozen miles. Whatever you fear is what comes. With a rustle from the woods by the road, over 100 fierce-looking forest bandits charged out, instantly surrounding them tightly. The lady hugged the silver chalice, holding the holy medicine tightly. Garrick drew his long sword, sweating profusely. Barnaby forced himself to stay calm, puffed out his belly, and roared, "I am the former clerk. Touching us is going against the Lord." The Oneid minor leader taking charge sneered, "I even chopped the Lord Baron. You think I'm afraid of you, a clerk?" Barnaby's brain turned, catching a blind spot. "Are you Blackbeard Rowan's men?" "That's right. I run with Boss Rowan." Barnaby immediately put on a face full of confidence. "What a coincidence. We have a life-and-death friendship with Leader Rowan. Try touching me, and see if Rowan doesn't dismantle your bones." The minor leader was stunned, caught in a dilemma. The scene instantly stalemated. Just then, an angry shout came from the hillside. "Put down your swords." Blackbeard Rowan walked down with large strides, took a close look, and smiled. "Brothers of Oakhaven Village, in this chaos of war, you're running around carrying so many bundles?" The minor leader broke into a cold sweat and quickly took his men to retreat. Rowan was extremely loyal and offered to escort them to the edge of the market town. Barnaby was so excited he slumped to the ground on the spot, constantly praising God's protection. The journey was silent. Rowan escorted them to a few miles outside the town and arranged to meet here early tomorrow morning. Barnaby led the people towards the town gates. The defending guards took a close look and their souls flew away. They were ready to drop the portcullis on the spot. Lord Barnaby, weren't you eaten by a witch in Oakhaven Village?" It turned Turned out these two soldiers were the deserters who followed Sir Derek to Oakhaven Village last time and had their courage broken by the witch audio I played. Barnaby was overjoyed inside, but on the surface, he was as steady as an old dog. He pointed at the big sun in the sky and cursed, "Broad daylight and you call me a ghost? I think you have ghosts in your heart. I took my wife out of the city to take refuge, and now that the heat has passed, I just came back." The two soldiers looked at the sun, then looked at Barnaby's shadow on the ground, swallowed hard, and quickly let them pass. Barnaby settled his wife to dispense medicine at the monastery and turned to go to the east of the city. He brought my ultimate mission on this trip, to get a scholar for the village and wipe out illiteracy for the whole village. In a dilapidated attic, the poor scholar Iman, wearing a patched scholar's robe, shook his head like a rattledrum upon hearing he had to go to the desolate Oakhaven village. "It's chaos and war outside. I won't go. I still have several seminary students to teach. We scholars have quills and ambition. We absolutely won't bow our waists for a few pieces of black bread. A few pieces of black bread won't do, right?" Sitting outside the box, I sneered, picked up the pliers, and snip, cut off a piece of silver the size of a fingernail, and casually tossed it into the box. Bang! A huge pure silver stone larger than a fist smashed heavily onto Iman's broken wooden table. Flashing silver light stung the poor scholar's eyes. Iman's legs went soft, his eyeballs almost popping out onto the ground. This is, Barnaby gave a domineering sneer. "This is the hardship fee given by the Holy Lord. As for those students of yours, refund their tuition." Iman was still making a dying struggle. "Insulting to scholars? Absolutely not." I picked up the pliers, snip, cut off an even larger piece of silver, and airdropped it again. Bang! Two massive silver bricks sat side by side on the table. Iman broke character in a second and shouted loudly, "I am going." That afternoon, my same city express delivery arrived. I carefully carried the large cardboard box to the side of the diorama box. Tearing open the packaging, a custom medieval star Fort Citadel model, over half a meter long and over 60 centimeters wide, impressively appeared. Composite press board for outer walls, thin sheet metal for inner wall partitions, and underneath it even hid a motor and large tires. Full of over 200 rooms, multiple towers, and inner courtyards, the structure was extremely formidable. This was the super fortress I spent $2,000 of my hard-earned money to get. I grabbed the remote control and tested it. The tires operated normally. No problems. Lifting the glass cover of the diorama box, I cleared my throat. "Illyra, inform everyone. There's work to do. Clear out an area 50 zhang square in the center of the village and retreat to the edges." Illyra quickly shouted to evacuate the crowd. The villagers crowded by the old city wall, completely confused. I directly reached out my large hand, pinched a broken thatched cottage in the center of the village, and grabbed it up along with the ground. Whoosh! The villagers watched helplessly as a house flew straight up into the high sky, traced a parabola, and landed steadily on the barren slope outside the village. Then came the second one, the third one. Like playing Monopoly, I cleared out the buildings in the village center in no time. Even the newly built sanctuary, I pinched it up in one grab and put it back on my desk as a decorative craft. The empty space was cleared. I picked up that massive star fort, aimed it at the empty space, and slowly lowered it. The clouds broke, and an extra-large steel and stone fortress 100 meters long, over 120 meters wide, with stone walls 9 meters high crashed onto the muddy ground with a Sunan sky blotting oppressive force. Finding the tires underneath too conspicuous, I simply extended a finger and dug 2 deep trenches in the ground, buried the wheels underground so the fortress chassis was completely flush with the ground, and then compacted it with sand and dirt. Perfect. The whole village looked at this fortress of war descending from heaven, and their brains completely crashed. I sent down a divine decree. Every married couple, every adult, gets 1 room each. Build the doors and windows yourselves with your own hands. After a dead silence, an earth-shattering wild cheer erupted. The Holy Lord has bestowed a castle from heaven. Praise the Almighty Silas. Both new and old refugees swarmed the fortress like crazy to claim rooms. That simpleton Garrick had just returned from running errands outside. Seeing his parents carrying a wooden bed into the castle, he asked around and found out he also got a suite, making him grin widely with joy. Illyra took the opportunity to shout, "Brother Garrick, the Holy Lord rewards you with 5 pounds of white sugar, 50 pounds of flour, and 10 pounds of fatty pork. Take it as a betrothal gift to marry a wife." Garrick was so excited he couldn't find his teeth, shouting at the top of his lungs, asking his mother to arrange blind dates for him. Early the next morning, the scholar Iman, who was smashed into coming by silver bricks, officially took office. Looking at the mountain of rice, flour, oil, salt, and cured meat piled in his assigned room, his calves cramped. This god gave way too much. Taking his Latin parchment scrolls, he walked to the inner courtyard. Barnaby, Illyra, and all the children and young people in the village who wanted to learn to read were waiting for him. Just as he prepared to start lecturing, Illyra suddenly raised her hand. "Scholar Iman, wait a moment. The Holy Lord says before class, we must first do morning exercises to strengthen our bodies. This is called scientific night training." Iman was stunned. "Scientific? What school of etiquette is this?" Illyra pointed at the sky. "Everyone turn around. Look at the Holy Lord's divine illusion." I picked up my phone, screen horizontal, hovering above the main tower. Fingerprint unlock, and the screen instantly erupted with blinding light. A giant, full-color glowing screen, 30 meters long and 14 meters high, hung in midair. A video played. A modern fitness instructor in tight clothes shouted from the screen, accompanied by dynamic electronic music. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep breathing. Squats. Illyra shouted sternly. The Holy Lord commands. Everyone follow the illusion and do it. All the men, women, and children in the village quickly followed the movements in the video, twisting blindly, stretching arms, kicking legs, swaying left and right, frequently bumping into a whole swath of people. The scene was comical to the extreme. Iman, looking at that unbelievable giant moving picture scroll, had his worldview completely shattered. While wildly muttering Confucius does not speak of strange forces and chaotic gods, Lord forgive this anomaly, his body was extremely honest, following along and mimicking the squatting motions. The good days didn't last 2 days. That morning, I was slurping pasta and drinking cola when the alarm inside the box suddenly went off loudly. The sentry on the city wall howled at the top of his lungs. Someone ran out from the mountains. It's a bloody man. I clicked on the peripheral surveillance view. A dark, skinny man in ragged clothes, covered in blood, stumbled and rolled down the northern hillside, smashing heavily in front of the fortress doors. Garrick quickly opened the door and dragged him in. Barnaby recognized him at a glance. This man was the minor bandit leader who had escorted them previously, named One-Eyed Pete. Pete's mouth was full of bloody foam, gasping for breath. Lord Barnaby, save us. The rebel leaders Gordon and Bullock want to rob Oakhaven village. Leader Rowan absolutely refused. Those 2 animals stabbed the leader and locked him in a cave. Tonight, they are coming for a night raid on the fortress. As soon as he finished speaking, the whole scene fell dead silent. Barnaby's face turned ashen, and he roared, "Prepare for battle! Everyone prepare for battle!" The villagers panicked into a mess. Fighting a battle during the day allows for throwing stones, but how do you fight a night raid in the pitch black? Barnaby made a prompt decision. Garrick, you run fast. Hurry to White Raven Manor and invite Viscount Eldrick to be the commander. Quick! Garrick stuffed some dried meat and flatbread in his pockets, spread his big feet, and sprinted away wildly. A journey of 2 Shishin 4 hours was forcibly run as if he were flying. Arriving at White Raven Manor, the Viscount heard Oakhaven village was in trouble. Without a second word, he led out 2 war horses. Garrick didn't know how to ride, so he tightly hugged the horse's neck, and the 2 rode like the wind back to the fortress. The Viscount rushed into the Star Fort. First, he was shocked speechless by this super fortress with multiple towers and dead-angle crossfire. God, this defensive layout is simply flawless. The Viscount hurriedly climbed the wall to survey the terrain, immediately setting his tactics. We can't defend statically. Defending against thieves for 1,000 days will inevitably breed exhaustion. We will directly open the main gates wide and lure the thieves into the trap. Utilizing the narrow passages of this inner courtyard, we'll close the door and beat the dogs, suffocating them all in the killing pit and smashing them with stones. Tactics set, defense lines deployed. But a narrow retreat passage became a fatal hidden danger. They really couldn't spare troops to defend it. Sitting outside the box, looking at that passage, I grinned. Short on firepower, I pulled a windproof lighter out of my pocket. Illyra immediately understood, clearing the empty space. Everyone stepped back. The Holy Lord is going to borrow the thunder fire cannon of heaven. Pinching the lighter, I slowly lowered it into the end of the fortress passage. In the Viscount's eyes, an extremely bizarrely shaped giant bronze cannon, several zhang long, descended from heaven. The muzzle tightly sealed that retreat alley. It landed silently. Absolutely no one is allowed to stand within 3 zhang directly in front of the muzzle. Have the 2 blacksmiths bring their large iron hammers, aim at the mechanism behind it, and smash it hard for me. Cedric and Bran, carrying their large forging hammers, stood behind the lighter's button. 1, 2, 3. The 2 swung their hammers in full circles and smashed them down hard. Clang. The mechanism was pressed. Boom. The lighter's nozzle instantly erupted with a terrifying purplish-blue ball of flame. The extreme temperature tongue of fire over 3 meters long surged out like an angry dragon, directly swallowing the entire passage. The blazing high temperature twisted the air. The Viscount was so scared he retreated 7 or 8 steps, then laughed wildly with joy. The blazing flames of heaven. With this divine artifact, however many come will burn to death. Night thoroughly enveloped Shuangqing City. I sat in front of the computer, munching on a fried chicken leg while leisurely editing a video. Suddenly, my phone erupted with an ear-piercing alarm sound. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding. This was the night dynamic surveillance alarm I had set up beforehand being triggered. I immediately put down the chicken leg and leaned close to the diorama box. Pressing the north button on the edge, the field of view zoomed in on the northern hillside. Under the cold moonlight, shadows flickered in the dead woods. The rebel leaders Gordon and Bullock, leading over 200 Hunfe ruthless bandits with greed filling their eyes, were using the cover of night to sneak silently toward the towering stone walls of Oakhaven Village's giant fortress like a pack of hyenas. I sneered and pressed the safety lock of the lighter, slowly hovering a spare electric mosquito swatter igniter which can release high-voltage electric arcs above the fortress. Come on, traitors. There is a road to heaven, but you refuse to walk it. Today, I'll let you taste what it means to face the cyber thunder punishment of a dimensional strike. Night fell. I turned off the lights and stared at the surveillance cameras. The alarm sounded. Gordon and Bullock led over 200 ruthless bandits, creeping like hyenas to the base of the Star Fort's towering stone walls. Bullock threw a rope with an iron hook, climbing up the 9-meter high city wall in a few swift moves. He thought he was moving unnoticed by gods or ghosts, but actually, through the arrow slits of the wall walk, over a dozen pairs of eyes had already locked dead onto him. He slipped down the city wall and quietly opened the heavy, iron-bound wooden gates. The main force of the thief army surged into the maze-like inner courtyard passages like a tide. Just as they rushed into the first fortress square, countless torches instantly lit up on the surrounding rooftops. Viscount Eldrick stood on the roof, swish, drew his cruciform longsword, and was just about to show off by shouting a few knightly mottos. A tough peasant woman next to him didn't listen to his nonsense at all. She picked up a large stone and smashed it straight down. Bang! A thief soldier's head blossomed. The horn for the counterattack sounded. From both rooftops, giant stones and boiling water smashed down like raindrops. The thief army was instantly smashed dizzy, holding their heads and scurrying like rats. Gordon tried to charge into a side passage but was hacked back by Garrick, who was wearing Dowbleliered sheet metal plate armor, swinging his axe wildly. With no way out, the thief soldiers desperately squeezed into the final narrow escape passage. People squeezed against people, flesh against flesh. At the dark end of the passage, blacksmiths Cedric and Bran held their large iron hammers high. 1, 2, 3, strike, clang. The large hammers accurately struck the lighter's mechanism. Boom! The violent purplish-blue tongue of fire instantly erupted. Extreme temperature flames pounced straight at the passage. Charging at the very front, Bullock and Gordon didn't even have time to scream before instantly turning into two human torches. The entire passage turned into a living hell. The stench of scorched flesh shot up to the sky. Seeing the heat was about right, I extended a finger, pressed against the back of the lighter, and slowly pushed it forward. The giant flame-throwing bronze cannon rumbled forward, crushing and pressing in, spewing flames. The thief soldiers completely collapsed. Everyone knelt, soiling themselves, crying and begging God and the Holy Mother for mercy. Kill them all? No need. I released my finger, extinguishing the flame. Illyra announced loudly, all prisoners of war are incorporated into the redemption camp to perform hard labor to atone for their sins. I dug out Lego bricks and with a click, 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 enclosed a massive circle on the empty ground outside the fortress, herding this bunch of terrified thief soldiers inside. First task, go bury all the corpses outside for me. After resolving the crisis, the Viscount took Garrick and charged into the deep mountains overnight, rescuing Blackbeard Rowan, who was severely injured and dying. I picked a tiny bit of Yunnan Biao powder from my medicine box. In the villagers' eyes, it was like falling snow of healing filling the sky. The medicinal powder was applied, stopping the bleeding and growing new flesh. Modern medicine once again crushed medieval herbalism. Rowan woke up, but he absolutely refused to stay and burden Oakhaven village, taking his remnants and fading into the dark forest. Truly a tough guy. 2 days later, the sponsorship samples from the toy company arrived. All 1:200 miniature scale models. I grabbed a plastic toy bus and threw it straight onto the dirt road in front of the fortress gates. A bizarrely shaped steel giant beast descended from the sky. Illyra spoke. The Holy Lord commands you to board the vehicle and experience a miracle. Garrick and a few blockheads excitedly squeezed into the plastic carriage. I extended my index finger, pressed against the rear of the bus, and gave a gentle push forward. The bus glided smoothly on the dirt road. How could medieval people inside the vehicle have ever experienced the starting acceleration of a modern vehicle? They were instantly pressed hard against their seats. God, so fast. The steel giant beast runs like the wind. I took out my phone and recorded this highly visually impactful scene. A god's hand, massive as a mountain, pushing a modern bus filled with ancient little people, drag racing through a medieval village, added a filter, matched with the caption. The heavenly god bestows a magical war chariot upon medieval little people. Ancients experience the feeling of being pushed back into their seats for the first time. Uploaded it to TikTok and short video platforms. I went to brew a bowl of instant noodles, turned back, and looked at my phone. Holy shit, it blew up. Likes broke 100,000. The comment section went crazy. This tilt-shift photography is god tier. No trace of CG at all. The extras are too professional. Their shocked faces are acted out just like real medieval serfs. Update, update. Hurry up and do a live stream sale. I want to buy that Star Fort model. Drinking cola. I looked at the salvation index on the edge of my vision, which had expanded outwards by another 10 meters because Lady Beatrice was practicing medicine in the market town. Traffic and funds were both in place. Little people, are you ready to welcome a wave of true modernization in education reform? The video I edited of Giant Hand pushing a war chariot touring an ancient medieval village. Within a few hours of posting, its likes directly broke through 100,000. The comments section exploded into a pot of porridge. This tilt-shift photography is absolutely amazing. The interaction between the big hand and the little people in ancient costumes has zero sense of dissonance. Harvesting leaks milking followers for money? Buddy, I'll harvest them for you to see right now. I conveniently hung a shopping cart link under the video, listing the identical plastic toy car model, priced at $49.9. In the blink of an eye, over 10,000 orders were sold wildly. deducting commissions, sitting at home and just moving my fingers, $100,000 in pure profit instantly hit my account. The toy seller's WeChat rang frantically. He was so excited he was speaking incoherently. I directly gave him orders. Nobody wants little planes or little high-speed trains. Go open molds and make Western medieval miniature buildings, carriages, trebuchets. As long as it matches the tone of my videos, however many you make, I will sell for you. Making money till I was numb, I stretched and walked to the diorama box. Late at night, Oakhaven Fortress was quiet. A few dim oil lamps hung on the city walls, and 2 sentries were yawning. My gaze swept across, and on the balcony of the highest main tower stood a small black shadow. It was Illyra. During the day, this little girl wore the gorgeous white robes of a saintess, pretending to be solemn and majestic. Now, in the dead of night, she had changed back into her previous coarse, patched, tattered clothes. She tilted her head up, looking at the starry sky, pouting her little mouth high, her voice smaller than a mosquito. Holy Lord, are you busy in heaven? Taking advantage of your absence, they'll secretly say a few words. I'm dying of boredom. I almost spat out a mouthful of cola. Illyra wiped her tears, looking aggrieved. Everyone won't let me do anything. They just make me stand properly and upright. But I used to be the naughtiest girl in the whole village. I liked catching frogs and rolling in the mud. Today, I stole some cotton wanting to weave cloth, and Lord Barnaby pulled me aside and lectured me for half a day, insisting I pay attention to the image of an angel. If this goes on, I'm gonna suffocate. Listening to her crying, muttered complaints, my heart inexplicably felt a bit sour. I directly lifted the glass cover of the diorama box and brought my large face close. Under the moonlight, a giant face blotting out the sky and sun suddenly emerged from the clouds. Illyra was so scared she took 3 rapid steps back, plopped to her knees on the ground, trembling all over. Almighty Lord, you are here? I was wrong. I won't steal cotton anymore. I softened my voice, speaking softly. Go get the cotton. I permit it. Illyra abruptly looked up, a trace of unbelievable wild joy flashing in the depths of her eyes. Live the way you want to live. Don't care what others say. I stared at her serious little face, speaking word by word. First, you must be happy. Everything else comes second. I don't need you to sacrifice your own nature to maintain my so-called majesty. Illyra's eyes reddened. She drew a heavy cross, turned around like a joyful little deer, bounced down to the second-floor warehouse, plucked a wad of cotton bigger than herself, hid back in her room, and happily hummed a little tune while stepping on the loom. The next morning, just as the sun of the medieval continent rose, Oakhaven Village's modernized education officially kicked off. Illyra led all the brats in the village, standing neatly in the fortress square. The down-and-out scholar Iman held his Latin parchment scroll, just preparing for a long speech. Illyra gave an order. Everyone turn around. Look at the Holy Lord's divine illusion. Do night gymnastics. I turned on my phone, hovering horizontally above the tower. The screen instantly erupted with an intense light that dispersed the morning mist. The 8th set of aerobic exercises start now. First exercise, stretching. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the super full-color screen, over 30 meters wide and over 10 meters high, a group of people in modern sportswear performed movements in perfect unison. All the little people in the village were dumbfounded, clumsily following along and twisting blindly, confusing left and right, frequently crashing into each other. That scholar Iman, who kept saying heretical illusions, hid at the very back of the line, his body extremely honest as he crazily expanded his chest and shook his legs along with it. After exercises, it was time for nutritional supplements. I found a bag of modern goat milk powder, mixed in white sugar, and brewed it with boiling water. I took out a mineral water bottle cap, scooped it full, and placed it steadily in the center of the square. A miniature goat milk lake, over 5 meters in diameter and 1.5 meters deep, was born. The whole village lined up in a long queue holding wooden cups. Barnaby chugged half a cup, smacking his lips and wildly flattering. This goat milk actually has no gamey smell at all, and is as sweet as honey. Even His Majesty the current king would be dazed after drinking it. I sneered, grabbed a small pinch of dry milk powder, and dropped it down, turning it into a small white snow mountain. This is called holy milk powder. Brew with warm water for instant drinking. Barnaby was so shocked his jaw dislocated, repeatedly exclaiming it was a divine object from heaven. I took the opportunity to throw a modern children's English illustrated dictionary with phonetics to Iman, telling him this was the angel's method of learning characters. This old pedant hugged the dictionary, excitedly kissing the cover wildly, swearing to pass down these holy texts. Just as things were bustling here, the alarm sounded outside the village. The sheriff, Sir Derek, led over 100 soldiers, sweating profusely as they stood in front of the fortress gates. This bastard had been scared out of his wits last time by the ghost whales I played. Today, biting the bullet and coming here, he looked up and found that the colorful city wall from last time had turned into a 3 Shanghai steel and giant stone fortress. His calves were spinning. Barnaby ran up the city wall, face full of smiles, playing dumb. Derek had no time for nonsense. The new lord, Baron Charles, was arriving at his post soon, and he had to use the rebels' heads to deliver his commission. Where are Rowan's bunch? Where are the corpses of Gordon and Bullock? Barnaby understood instantly, pointing at the northern hillside. Those 2 traitor leaders were killed by us. Their corpses are buried right under that rock. Rowan fled into the deep mountains. Derek led his men to dig frantically, digging out 2 corpses that had been burned to charcoal by me using a lighter a few days ago. They stank to high heaven and were completely unrecognizable. Derek was overjoyed, slicing off the 2 charcoal heads with his sword and stuffing them into a burlap sack. As long as he had heads, he could fraudulently claim military merit. He didn't want to stay a second longer in this bizarre fortress, leading his soldiers in a hurried rush into the deep mountains to chase Rowan's remnants. Having sent away the soldiers, Barnaby wiped his sweat, preparing to send someone to the market town to buy horses. In these chaotic times of war, not even having a means of transportation when going out will sooner or later lead to trouble. Buying horses and learning to ride horses, too backward. I turned and opened a shopping website, frantically searching for miniature toys. Remote control cars wouldn't work. If they drove out of my field of view and hit the invisible wall, they'd be useless. It had to be something the little people could drive themselves. Finally, in a corner, I found a miniature solar-powered toy car, 3 centimeters long, 2.5 centimeters wide. No batteries, powered entirely by a solar panel. Runs when it sees light, stops when there's no light. I directly threw money at it for SF Express special delivery. By 3 p.m., the toy car was in my hands. I immediately hailed a cab and rushed to Old Kai's model shop. Old Kai, help me modify a toy. I slapped the solar toy car onto the table. Old Kai looked at this fingernail-sized thing and rolled his eyes. Modify what? This piece of junk doesn't even have a motor. Add a tractor-like handle to the front of the car to control the front wheel steering. And add a manually stretchable shading curtain to the solar panel. Modified frantically overnight. Early the next morning, the steering handle and shading curtain were perfectly installed on the car. Holding the modified solar toy car, I sat back down in front of the diorama box. Garrick, step forward. The simpleton trotted out of the fortress. The whole village followed him out to watch the excitement. Pinching the toy car, I broke through the clouds and slowly descended. In the eyes of the little people, a steel giant beast 6 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 3 meters high crashed heavily onto the mud. The roof held a massive black crystal panel, and bizarre levers were installed on the front. Get on. Today I teach you to drive the solar war chariot. Garrick and another strongman spent the strength of 9 bulls and 2 tigers climbing up tires taller than themselves, squeezing into the driver's seat. Garrick grabbed the steering handle tightly. His companion walked to the shading curtain, grinned foolishly, and pulled the shading cloth all the way open in one go. Sunlight instantly shone at full power on the solar panel. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The motor spun wildly. This toy car ran at a dozen centimeters per second in reality. Magnified 200 times in the Middle Ages, its speed directly broke past 100 kilometers per hour. Why, help me God. Caught off guard, the 2 blockheads were directly flipped backward into the carriage by the terrifying pushback sensation. The 6-meter-wide steel giant beast was like a wild dog off its leash, carrying a violent roar as it charged desperately straight toward the stone wall ahead. We're going to crash to death. The whole village covered their eyes and screamed in terror. In the nick of time, I abruptly extended 2 fingers, grabbing the car body in midair in one swoop. The wildly racing giant beast instantly hovered in midair, its 4 wheels still spinning madly in the air, emitting ear-piercing friction sounds. The 2 blockheads were so scared they almost wet their pants, lying in the car trembling like sieves. I shouted coldly, pulling it all the way open is max speed, covering it up is parking. Pull it open a little bit at a time, slowly. I placed the car back onto the ground. Garrick swallowed hard and carefully pulled the shading curtain open just a crack. The toy car started smoothly at a speed of 60 kilometers per hour. He steered left and right in the mud. The 2 idiots drag raced on the barren land outside the village, shouting and yelling excitedly, making the whole village drool with envy. They raced until dusk. When the sun went down, the light vanished, and the toy car instantly lost power and broke down, stopping dead on the barren land over 100 meters away from the village. The 2 blockheads were dumbfounded. They used all their milking strength, but they couldn't push such a massive steel magical beast an inch. Afraid it would be stolen outside, Garrick's eyes rolled, and he locked onto the hard labor convicts former thief soldiers on the distant hillside. Hey, come help push the car. Reward of 2 slices of salted meat per person. Once this was said, the hillside fell dead silent for 3 seconds, then erupted into wolf-like howls. Over a dozen hard labor convicts charged down the mountain like crazy. Every single one used their milking strength, forcibly pushing the giant beast back to the city gates. 2 days later, the 2 idiots mastered their driving skills. I decided to do something big. Test if this thing could break through the diorama box's invisible wall. Load it full of refined flour and salt. Go deliver supplies to White Raven Manor. The 2 blockheads piled hundreds of pounds of grain onto the car, pulled the shading curtain, and at 80 kilometers per hour, raced wildly down the King's Road. I stared intently at the edge of the diorama box. Swish! The toy car passed through the glass without any hindrance, disappearing from my field of view. It worked. As long as it was a vehicle operated by the little people themselves, it could break the dimensional restriction. At the same time, 30 miles away from the village on a forest hillside, the sheriff, Sir Derek, was leading over 100 spearmen, lying in ambush in the woods. On the King's Road, a bandit unit of over 200 people was walking sluggishly. The bandit leader taking charge, nicknamed Iron Hammer Harold, carried a giant war hammer and cursed continuously. Derek drew his long sword, murderous intent revealed in his eyes. As long as he wiped out these remnant bandits, he could clear his crimes before the new lord. Horol. Today next year will be the anniversary of your death. Entire army, attack. Derek gave a violent shout, and over 100 archers drew their bowstrings full, just preparing to fire a volley of arrows. Suddenly, from the king's road on the other side of the hill, a bizarre, thunderous roaring sound came. Rumble, 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 rumble. A massively suffocating steel monster, at a terrifying speed of 80 kilometers per hour, charged straight to the top of the hill like an arrow loosed from a bow. In the carriage, Garrick looked at the dense crowd of bandits ahead, scared out of his wits. Dodge quick, can't brake. At 80 kilometers per hour, what medieval infantry could fucking react in time? The 200+ bandits were collectively bewildered, looking up blankly at the wildly racing steel giant beast. Bang! An absolutely suspense-free dimensional crushing strike. Iron Hammer Harold didn't even have time to leave any last words before taking the car's front bumper head-on. His entire person flew sideways for over a dozen meters like a kite with a broken string. All his bones shattered on the spot, bleeding from all 7 orifices, dying violently. A few confidants beside him were directly knocked spinning 3.5 times in the air, smashing onto the ground with a splat, unable to even be scraped off. Devils war Kariot. Run! How could Garrick dare to pull the shading curtain to brake? He desperately gripped the steering wheel, welded the gas pedal, and the wheels wildly crushed over a ground full of severed limbs and broken arms, forcibly ramming a bloody path through the crowd of 200+ bandits. With a puff of smoke, a hitandron, vanishing at the end of the king's road, leaving the scene with a ground full of bewildered kingdom soldiers and bandits. Silence, death-like silence. The sword in Derek's hand was shaking. He swallowed hard, looked at the thief soldiers all over the ground whose life or death was unknown, and roared, "What are you standing there for? The bandit leader has been struck to death by God's thunder. Kill them for me." The soldiers woke up as if from a dream, firing a volley of arrows. Losing their leader, the bandits instantly routed. An ambush battle turned directly into a one-sided massacre. Derek won big time, attributing this to God's manifestation. An hour later, White Raven Manor. Viscount Eldrick was standing with his hands behind his back on the newly repaired stone wall, showing off. Suddenly, a guard tumbled and crawled over to report, "Lord, the people from Oakhaven Village came driving a monster." The Viscount went out to look, and Garrick and his companion tumbled and fell out of the car, crying and howling with miserable faces. "Lord Viscount, we ran people over and killed them on the road." The Viscount frowned, his gaze sweeping over the front of the car. The bumper was stained with piercing blood, still hanging with a few strips of tattered linen. The Viscount sneered, pinching the cloth strips. "What are you panicking for? In this day and age, what proper knight wears this kind of tattered cloth wandering on the king's road? Those you killed were definitely roving bandits." Hearing this, the 2 blockheads instantly breathed a sigh of relief, grinning widely with joy. "God bless, you should have said they were bandits earlier. Scared us to death." They nimbly unloaded the hundreds of pounds of rice, flour, grain, and oil from the car. Looking at these supplies that solved his urgent needs, the Viscount excitedly drew crosses in the air repeatedly to praise the Holy Lord. After praying, he approached that giant solar car, stroking the cold plastic shell, looking at the black crystal panel on the roof that could absorb sunlight. The Viscount took a deep breath, his eyes full of awe and fanaticism, murmuring in a trembling voice, "Work at sunrise, rest at sunset, no need for war horses to pull, moves when it sees light." Could this be the sun god's sky-patrolling war chariot from heaven? Watching the wildly racing solar toy car on my screen, I sneered and clicked into the Amazon search box. Since the logistics channels have been opened up, it's time for this medieval territory to welcome a wave of the steel torrent of true industrialization. I originally wanted to get some hardcore heavy industrial equipment, but glancing at the calendar, it was late August. The dry land of Oakhaven Village was as hard as an iron plate, and the serfs were rubbing their hands preparing to plant winter wheat. How do you plant without water? Industrialization can step back for a bit. The most urgent task is to give them a soaking rain. The water droplets sprayed from a household humidifier are too big. Dropping them in would definitely cause a flood. After searching for a while, I decisively placed an order for a medical nebulizer. The water mist sprayed by this thing is extremely fine. Magnified 200 times when dropped into the box, it's exactly a fine, misty rain. To avoid scaring the little people, I specifically broke off a plastic gargoyle head with wings, stuffed the nozzle into the monster's mouth, and glued it dead with double-sided tape. Everything ready, power on. Just then, a skinny man slipped out of the market town city gates. This person was named Lorcan, a bottom-tier papermaker on the verge of starvation. After being heavily persuaded by Lady Beatrice in the monastery, he clutched 2 pieces of hard, dry black bread and ran toward Oakhaven Village. As he walked, he suddenly felt a burst of coolness, looked up, and instantly froze. A low cloud floated in the sky, and from the cloud poked out a massive gargoyle head. The giant beast opened its large mouth, madly spraying water mist towards the ground. Lorcan hadn't been in the rain for 3 years, and on the spot, he screamed frantically, "God has manifested. An angel has sent down sweet rain." He swung his 2 legs and desperately sprinted toward the raining patch of land ahead. Coincidentally, I was pressing the directional button, moving the rain cloud toward Oakhaven Village. Lorcan ran on the ground. The gargoyle floated in the sky. Like a hound chasing a bone, He ran completely out of breath, forcibly chasing the rain cloud all the way into Oakhaven's fortress. By this time, the village was already boiling over. Hundreds of villagers rushed into the fields, looking up with their mouths open, letting muddy water coat their entire bodies. The hard labor convicts even rushed down from the quarry, spinning and dancing madly in the rain. Suddenly, everyone in the village knelt in perfect unison, shouting, "Praise the almighty holy Lord Silas." Lorcan was completely bewildered. He grabbed a villager and asked, "It's clearly an emissary of heaven making it rain. Why are you thanking the holy Lord?" The villager rolled his eyes at him. "What do you know? The holy beast in the cloud was called over by the holy Lord to help. Of course we thank the holy Lord first." Lorcan was greatly shocked. Just how massive was this holy Lord's prestige? He plopped to his knees in front of the fortress gates, frantically kissing the ground, begging to be taken in. I conveniently switched the camera over, having Illyra and the blacksmith Cedric go out to receive him. Cedric took one look at the newcomer and smiled. It turned out this Lorcan was the papermaker with the best craftsmanship in the territory. The Star Fort had built over 200 rooms, and the windows didn't even have a sheet of paper or parchment covering them. This guy came at exactly the right time. Illyra directly conveyed my decree. Stay and make paper. Room and board covered every month, plus issued refined flour and roast meat. Hearing this divine treatment, Lorcan directly threw any serf status to the 9 heavens, gloriously becoming a refugee. Illyra led him into the artisan district of the fortress, assigning him a deluxe single room with sheet metal interior walls. Lorcan stuttered and asked, "Lady Saintess, making paper requires a large pool to ret bamboo and wood pulp, and we also need quicklime. Short on a pool?" I casually grabbed the red mineral water bottle cap on the table, filled it with water, and tossed it straight down toward the artisan courtyard. With a loud clang, a god-tier large water pool full of clear water smashed steadily into the center of the courtyard. Lorcan was so scared he plopped down paralyzed on the ground, his legs trembling continuously. I continued to issue orders, drafting hard labor convicts to chop trees, and arranging for the village masons to burn lime. Within half a day, a purely handmade medieval papermaking assembly line was brought to life. The next day, the package arrived. The toy factory boss had sent me a batch of ancient-style miniature building models. 1:200 scale, fine craftsmanship. It had been raining lately, and that group of hard labor convicts had been huddling inside the circle I built with Lego bricks, not even having a roof. It was time to upgrade them. I grabbed a handful of plastic stone forts and lifted the box cover. Doin'. Over a dozen exquisite medieval stone houses with chimneys descended from the sky, smashing heavily onto the ground, rolling up a cloud of dust. The hard labor camp, which originally didn't even have a roof, instantly pieced together into a brand new high-end villa district. The hard labor convicts and the villagers in the distance were all dumbfounded. I had Illyra go over and shout, "The Holy Lord sees you working devoutly. This is a reward for redemption." 12 people squeeze into one room, work hard, and strive to regain the status of freemen as soon as possible. Who knew that when this group of hard labor convicts heard this, they instantly grew anxious, drawing crosses towards the sky one after another to show loyalty. "Holy Lord, we are living very happily in the redemption camp. We are willing to do hard labor here for the rest of our lives, and absolutely do not want to become free." Hearing this, I was so angry I laughed. "Want to lie flat? In your dreams. From now on, I'll set up a model worker paysetter among you, give him a large single room, issue big fish and big meat every day, and see if you guys start grinding involution or not." The camera cut to the territory market town. The newly appointed Baron Charles was worrying so much he was pulling his hair out. The previous Baron was chopped down, the granaries were looted empty, the serfs were starving so much they were eating dirt, and the autumn harvest tithes had to be paid soon. This was a complete dead end. This old brother was a stubborn and upright noble. He slammed the table and decided to go to the countryside to find wealthy merchants to apportion quotas, forcing the rich to dig into their pockets to pay the taxes on their behalf. He took a ticket of heavily armored knights down to the countryside, his heart growing colder the further he walked. 9 out of 10 houses were empty, white bones were everywhere. As he walked, his eyes suddenly lit up. There was actually a village farming ahead. Not only were the people in the village not emaciated from starvation, there were even a few fat ones. Looking closer, a star fort of war towering 3 zhang high stood right in the center of the village. This scale was simply the fortress of a Grand Duke. Charles was overjoyed and immediately brought his men forward to knock on the door and beg for alms. Inside the fortress, Barnaby bristled like a cat whose tail was stepped on upon hearing the new baron was here. "Quick, hide all the iron armor and solar war chariots bestowed by the Holy Lord. Don't let this official see them." He grabbed Illyra, urgently getting their stories straight. "This noble isn't easy to fool. Later, you change into your most gorgeous velvet robes and pretend to be the mistress of this fortress. You'll be the butler. Remember, we are an ancient Highlander noble family. You must put on full airs." Illyra was so shy she wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Pretend to be the Lord's wife? Will the Holy Lord agree to this? Listening from the sky, I was immensely amused, directly sending down a divine voice. "Sounds interesting. Go try it." Receiving my approval, Illyra took a deep breath, instantly possessed by the spirit of an actress, brought out the most dignified demeanor of the entire village, sat in the oak-carved high-back chair on the 3rd floor of the main tower, her eyes as cold as a block of ice. Charles entered the door, feeling his heart palpitate all the way up from being shocked by the fortress crossfire and defensive fortifications. Walking to the 1st floor chapel, he looked up and saw a Latin stone-carved inscription, dedicated to the protector of our clan, the almighty Lord Silas. Charles was wealthy in knowledge, his brain spinning crazily like a zoetrope. A family god, named Silas. Could this be a branch of the the ancient Templar Knights who had lived in seclusion here since the Roman Empire era? Holy shit, this is a top-tier hidden family that's been passed down for 1,000 years. No wonder they have the money to build such a huge fortress. Charles was completely intimidated by the setting he had imagined himself, all his arrogance vanishing, and respectfully climbed to the 3rd floor. Illyra's face sank like water, cherishing her words like gold, relying entirely on Barnaby to chime in from the side. Charles bit the bullet and started crying about his miseries, his tears falling patter-patter, and finally revealed his true intentions. The commoners of the territory can't survive anymore. Since the family is so wealthy, why not take out a sum of gold coins to pay the taxes on their behalf to avoid rioting mobs burning your castle? This was naked moral kidnapping plus intimidation. Barnaby turned to look at Illyra. Illyra, listening closely to my instructions, slowly shook her head. I sneered at the box. Tell him wants to take money to fill the king's corrupt officials' holes? No way in hell. We won't give the government a single copper coin, but we are willing to provide grain. Every single grain of wheat must go directly into the mouths of the disaster victims. Barnaby instantly perked up, throwing my exact words dead in Charles' face. Charles grew anxious, thumping his chest to swear he was absolutely incorruptible. Barnaby sneered repeatedly. You hand it up? Who dares to guarantee it won't be embezzled by the Franks in the royal city? Besides, you offended the regent archbishop and were exiled here. You can't even protect yourself. So stop pretending to be a big shot. Charles' body stiffened. His fatal weak point had been directly poked. Following my hints, Barnaby continued to output. Instead of forcing donations here, why don't you write a letter to your archbishop friends in the monastery? Have them report the tragic situation here up the chain. Everyone signs a joint petition, begging the king to exempt the tithes here. Charles felt as if he had been enlightened by ultimate wisdom, right? Those upright bishops have massive reputations. This thing definitely has a chance. He made the decision to agree on the spot. Next, Barnaby and Charles, the 2 old foxes, plus a finance officer, began crazily haggling over the specific details of distributing porridge for disaster relief, preventing embezzlement, setting locations, dispatching manpower. They talked until the sky grew dark and the earth spun. I yawned listening to it, too lazy to care about this crap, turned my head, and picked up my phone. Yesterday I filmed a video of the old village chief making miniature wooden bowls and weaving bamboo baskets, and uploaded it to a short video platform. A top-down perspective, one continuous shot to the end, no special effects added. Clicking it open, the comment section had completely exploded. Holy shit, this medieval miniature model is amazing. One continuous shot with no flaws. That old man is really doing the work. I had a flash of inspiration, telling Illyra to go find the old village chief and get a few micro-carving crafts. The old village chief was thrilled, immediately offering up a full set of equipment. I reached into the box and carefully pinched out a 1 centimeter long pocket rattan chair. I placed this fingernail-sized rattan chair in front of the camera, demonstrating in all directions that weaving texture as fine as a hair strand, then turned around and listed it on Amazon, priced at $88,800 US. As a result, in less than 24 hours, the system prompted, paid. Enrich, slapping my thigh, I had to give the old village chief some tangible, real benefits. Rice, flour, oil, and salt were too tacky. I glanced at the Dove chocolate on the table. Pulling out a small knife, I cut off a tiny piece the size of a sesame seed and accurately airdropped it in front of the village chief. The old village chief looked at this black giant stone in front of him, bigger than himself, with a face full of bewilderment. I told him to try eating it. He picked up an iron chisel, knocked off a crumb, and threw it into his mouth. The next second, the old village chief experienced pupil earthquake, his whole old face smiling until it wrinkled like a chrysanthemum. God, it's so delicious, sweet and smooth, like the nectar stone of heaven. This commotion immediately attracted the whole village. Garrick watched, his mouth watering, shamelessly massaging the village chief's legs for half a day just to exchange for a tiny bit of residue the size of a fingernail. Garrick tossed it into his mouth, his expression instantly exploding, howling at the top of his lungs. This thing is 10,000 times more delicious than that black magical water. The whole village went completely crazy. In the middle of the night, holding their family's smoked bacon, eggs, and white flour, they tightly blocked the door of the village chief's house, clamoring ready to trade their entire net worth for a bite of the immortal's food. That night, at the village chief's door was like a boiling pot. The old village chief, who was usually highly respected and spoke slowly during the day, was almost dismantled Durandal by the whole village at night. Outside the door stood a massive crowd, everyone holding their family's most valuable items in their arms. Smoked meat, eggs, half a bag of millet, 2 old hens they couldn't bear to eat. Someone even brought a piece of salted fish from the bottom of their chest. Everyone had red eyes and smoking throats, crowding around the door shouting all at once. Village chief, trade me a tiny bit, just the size of a fingernail will do. Me too, I brought all my family's smoked meat. My family offers 10 eggs, no, 20. The old village chief hugged that black immortal stone bigger than himself and huddled in the house, the wrinkles on his face almost splitting from smiling, yet fiercely guarding it, refusing to share more. It couldn't be helped. This was bestowed by the Holy Lord, as sweet as clouds blown out by immortals, smooth like oil yet not oil, melting in the mouth. Even old people with bad teeth could eat it. Who could bear to part with it? Finally, Illura arrived. With a straight face, she suppressed the crowd. Stop making a fuss. This was bestowed by the Holy Lord to the village chief. No snatching. If you want to trade, you must follow the rules during the day tomorrow. Only after she spoke did the situation barely stabilize. But stabilizing was one thing. The villagers simply refused to disperse, stubbornly squatting in front of the village chief's door all night, looking exactly like a group of fanatic zealots waiting for the church doors to open to grab the first incense. Sitting outside the box, I watched with great amusement. I casually clicked on my phone and took another look at that miniature rattan chair that sold for 88,000 USD. My mood was quite excellent. But fun aside, serious business still had to be done. Early the next morning, the entrance of the fortress became lively. The four-wheeled carriage convoys coming from the market town were in an endless stream. The new Baron Charles had personally promised absolutely not letting anyone embezzle a single grain, so he watched this matter extremely closely. Today was the first day of transporting grain. He personally rode a warhorse, leading the finance officer and knights, accompanying the transport convoy to the main gates, watching empty carts enter the fort one by one, and then fully loaded large carts of refined white flour drive out one by one. The finance officer stood beside him, lowering his voice to sigh. The strength of this mysterious family is simply unfathomable. This is already the 30th cart of flour. It's too terrifying. Charles nodded silently, becoming even more certain in his heart. The foundation of an ancient aristocratic family passed down from the Roman Empire was indeed not just bragging. If he hadn't clung to this thick thigh, as a new lord just arriving at his post, he would have been buried alive by the mess of the northern famine. Only when a full 40 carts of flour were all loaded and sent out did Barnaby leisurely come out of the fort, smiling and placing a hand on his chest toward Charles. Lord Baron, the 40 carts of flour our family promised have all been dispatched today. Next, it depends on your lordship's disaster relief methods. Charles also bowed solemnly. I will personally keep my eyes on this grain. If anyone dares to embezzle, they will definitely go to the gallows. Barnaby narrowed his eyes and smiled. Countless pairs of eyes are watching. If the Baron is a good lord, naturally you will be protected by God. If not, heh. Charles swore on the spot. If I embezzle even a mouthful of this disaster relief grain, let me go to hell and die a terrible death. Charles reined his horse and left, escorting the transport convoy straight to the territory market town. And on my side, I had already shifted my attention to another, more interesting matter. Oakhaven Village was about to plant winter wheat. To be honest, as a contestant who grew up in the city and couldn't tell the 5 grains apart, I naturally had a terrible but loves to watch interest in things like sowing. The box's perspective was pulled by me to above the wheat fields. While I used my camera facing down, setting up long and short lenses to film, I searched on my computer for winter wheat planting precautions. Oh, first plow the land deeply, prepare the soil before sowing. Turning to look into the box, Garrick was dragging a heavy plow helping his parents turn the soil. His bull-like strength was ridiculously huge, making the dirt fly with a whoosh. I was enlightened instantly. Well, when it comes to medieval traditional agricultural technology, I better not show off my incompetence. Continuing to search down, when I flipped to sections like chemical fertilizer and soil pH, I perked up again. The soil pH value should ideally be around 6.5. Holy shit, how do I measure this? So I immediately continued researching. I actually found It Flower Markets sold soil pH probe needles. As for adjusting the soil, that required a messy bunch of stuff like potassium sulfate, monopotassium phosphate, and biological bacteria. Therefore, reading materials, calling relatives in my rural hometown, I used every method I could. Holding the pH probe needle I just bought from the flower market, I aimed straight at the field in the box and stabbed it down. Garrick's family was grunting and panting while plowing the field when suddenly they saw an absurdly thick, shiny silver giant stick descend from the sky, stabbing into their field with a boom. All 3 of them were dumbfounded on the spot. Garrick looked up and yelled, "Holy Lord, is this a spear dropped by an angel?" His parents were so scared they quickly covered his mouth. Bastard, how can you speak to the Lord like that? Too lazy to explain, I stared at the display screen on the probe, which clearly read, pH 7.5, a bit alkaline. I brought out the mixed fertilizer, calling Illura over. This magical immortal fertilizer, have Garrick's family weigh 2 pounds. No more, no less, dissolve it in water, and pour it evenly. This year's winter wheat, it's secure. Hearing secure, Illura's eyes lit up, and she immediately ran to the edge of the field to pass the message. Garrick, the Holy Lord has bestowed immortal fertilizer upon your family, saying he guarantees your family a bountiful harvest this year. Garrick's father was so excited he knelt towards the sky. Praise God, praise the Holy Lord. To a medieval serf, a bountiful harvest in the fields was more real than any empty promises. Then I pulled up the probe, moved to the next family, continued measuring, continued mixing, and continued issuing fertilizer. So for an entire day, above all the fields in Oakhaven Village, the miracle of silver spears descending from the sky was staged. The probe stabbed here for a while, stabbed there for a while Illura acted like an angelic messenger running all over the map, going door to door conveying the divine decrees. 3 pounds for your family, 2.5 pounds for your family. Your family's land is severely off, for pounds, but you must mix in extra water. The people of Oakhaven Village were all beaming with joy, while the refugees from outside villages could only stand by and watch eagerly, so envious their eyes almost turned green. The serfs here have it so good, they have land to farm, and the Holy Lord bestows immortal fertilizer. Our own village hasn't even had rain yet. Sigh. Hearing this, my hand paused, and I felt a bit helpless. The field of view hadn't opened up over there. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't reach it. But right at this moment, the salvation index outside the box suddenly began jumping wildly, ticking up rapidly, increasing by 5 points in the blink of an eye. I was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized the new Baron Charles had begun dispensing porridge. The camera cut to the territory market town. In the cathedral square of the market town, poverty relief sheds had already been erected. The refined white flour delivered by that mysterious family had been boiled into vats of thick wheat paste, placed there steaming hot. Baron Charles himself, wearing a surcoat, sat by the shed, his eyes staring dead like a falcon at the guards distributing the grain. The finance officer trotted back and forth between the kitchen and the distribution points, sweating profusely. The current baron's territory was truly a mess rotten to the core. The severe drought originally forced the serfs to the brink of death. Then the recent mob riots happened. The commoners who refused to join the thieves could only flee. Massive numbers of refugees surged into the market town, abandoning their fields and homes, seeking only to survive. As a result, everywhere inside the city walls were beggars, sick people, and those starved to mere skin and bones. As soon as news spread that the government was dispensing porridge, disaster victims immediately surged from all directions, surrounding the relief sheds 3 layers deep. But with the Lord Knight personally holding the fort and large numbers of guards holding long spears maintaining order, no matter how hungry the refugees were, they dared not snatch blindly, only obediently lining up, holding broken wooden bowls to receive the wheat paste. There was a man thin beyond human shape. After receiving a bowl, he couldn't even bear to drink it himself first. He quickly ran to the street corner, propped up a young man who was equally on the verge of taking his last breath, and carefully poured it into his mouth. "Little brother, you're finally saved. Drink this and you can survive. Big brother, you drink too. He'll drink too. He'll drink too." The 2 brothers each took a mouthful. After finishing that bowl of flour paste, they lay back in the mud, rubbing their stomachs, their eyes full of the bewilderment of surviving a disaster. As a result, at this moment, a guard shouted at the top of his lungs over there, "Listen clearly, all of you, don't hide it secretly. Just drink until you're full today. Tomorrow Lord Baron will still dispense porridge. There will be some every day." Hearing this, the older brother's tears fell on the spot. "Little brother, there will be some every day. Our territory has finally gotten a merciful, good Lord." In the next instant, 2 faint points of light drifted up from them, flew across dozens of miles, and injected directly into the box in front of me. I stared at the screen, watching helplessly as the salvation index skyrocketed wildly. In just the time it takes for breakfast, it actually surged by a dozen or 20 points. Calculating at this speed, from this single meal alone, hundreds of people who should have starved to death were forcibly pulled back. What does that mean? It means the fog of war is about to open again. I quickly reached my hand to the east, south, west, north buttons, pressing them wildly with slaps. Sure enough, the field of view expanded a lot to the surroundings again. To the south, crossing the dark forest. To the north, over the barren hills, new terrain was gradually revealed. Then, at the edge of my vision in the northeast corner, I saw a small, desolate village. "Oh, the second village has appeared." I immediately switched the camera back to Oakhaven Village, calling Illura. "Illura, that village 5 or 6 miles away in the northeast direction from Oakhaven. What's it called?" Illura answered upon hearing it. "Isn't that Brook Village? The big guy Tob and their original village." As soon as she finished speaking, the box flashed with golden light again. After I blinked and looked again, 2 lines of semi-transparent English words had unexpectedly appeared next to the buttons. Oakhaven Village. Brook Village. I felt a burst of joy inside, reached out and pressed Brook Village, and the perspective instantly switched over. Pressing Oakhaven Village, it immediately switched back. Holy shit, quick fast travel points. This feature was just too sweet. I immediately had Illura call all the refugees who originally belonged to Brook Village to assemble. Before long, 20 or so villagers from Brook Village stood before me. They were all honest people who originally hadn't followed the rebel army to revolt, and were later abducted to the fortress by Barnaby using flour. The most conspicuous among them was, of course, that infinitely strong big guy, Tob. This blockhead looked up and yelled, "What orders does the Holy Lord have?" Tob guarantees to complete them. After completion, can I take the reward to the village chief to trade for Heaven's Nectarstone's chocolate? The village chief angrily cursed from behind. "Shut up." I didn't bother arguing with him, directly asking, "Watching Oakhaven Village plow and so just now, did you have some thoughts?" The crowd fell silent for a few seconds. In the end, it was Tob who couldn't hold back first, muttering softly, "So envious I almost cried, but we don't have land here. Your fiefs are all in Brook Village?" "Yes, Lord, my family still has 2 acres. Wanna go back?" Now everyone dared not make a sound, even more terrified of answering wrongly. Finally, Tob mustered his courage. "I don't want to go back. I'm quite happy working for the Holy Lord here, but my father wants to go back to farm. He doesn't know how to do anything else besides planting wheat." I nodded. "Then that's fine. Call Garrick, immediately drive Solar War Chariot number 2, and transport the people of your village back to Brook Village to take a look." "Tob?" His big face was full of "I don't understand, but I'm greatly shocked." I only replied with one sentence, "You'll know when you get there." Next, Solar War Chariot number 2 set off. This vehicle was much larger than number 1, pretty much the level of a miniature bus. The roof had solar panels like black crystals, the carriage could seat people, and it even added brakes and sunshades. Garrick and Tob had practiced for a few days and could already drive the car decently. At least they wouldn't easily run people over to death anymore. The car bumped and swayed towards Brook Village, while I directly switched perspectives over, picked up the medical nebulizer, aimed at the sky above Brook Village and started spraying. From far away away, the villagers on the car saw their own village. Familiar wooden houses, familiar fields, familiar outlines. Only not having been back for over a month, the village already seemed both familiar and strange. More importantly, a layer of vast, white misty rain was shrouding the sky above the village. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real misty rain. Looking up again, that familiar low cloud appeared again, and a giant gargoyle dragon head poked out of the cloud, spewing fine mist towards the village. The Brook villagers went crazy on the spot. The Holy Lord has invited the Archangel who dispenses clouds and rain to our village. My family's wheat fields are saved. Stop the car. Stop the car quickly. Before the car even stopped steadily, a group of people had already jumped off, crying and laughing, sprinting wildly forward. Garrick looked disdainful from behind. Having a car and not taking it, insisting on running, so stupid. As soon as he finished speaking, Tob gave him a backhand rap on the head. You calling my parents stupid? Garrick held his head and squatted down, submitting in a second. My bad, my bad. The two reconciled on the spot, continuing to be good friends. While the Brook villagers ahead had already rushed into the misty rain, threw themselves at the edge of their own fields, grabbed the moist dirt, and began laughing wildly at the sky. That kind of joy was different from having a full meal in the fortress back then. That was the joy of standing back on their own land again. The 20 or so people instantly farmed me another 8 points of salvation index on the spot. After returning to Oakhaven village, they immediately surrounded Illyra to plead, wanting to move back to live in Brook village. But I rejected it flat out. You can go back to farm during the day, but you must return to the fortress at night. Living in Brook village long term is too dangerous. The villagers looked bewildered, feeling that wasn't it already stable now? The bandit leaders were gone, the new baron was dispensing porridge. Why was it still dangerous? I couldn't explain in detail, so I could only sigh. Illyra, at this time, was extremely good at filling in the blanks. She lowered her voice and said to the crowd mysteriously, when the Holy Lord said these words, his divine voice carried sorrow, as if sighing for the common people of the world. Heaven must know what disaster is imminent, but just cannot speak it to us. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately dared not ask further. If the immortals say it's dangerous, then it must be dangerous. So from that day on, the people of Brook village assembled early every morning, took Solar War Chariot number 2 to farm, and took the car back to Oakhaven Fortress at dusk, commuting back and forth, just like clocking in for work. I observed for a few days and quickly found another problem: large tracts of farmland in Brook village were empty, with pitifully low utilization rates. The reason was also simple. Originally, the village had a sizable population, but most of them had been coerced by the rebel army to revolt. Those who died, those who fled. The remaining 20 or so people all only farmed their own family's land, not daring to touch others' fields. How could this do? I immediately called Illyra and Barnaby, having them handle the redistribution of idle farmland. Barnaby was an old hand at this aspect. First, he tallied the remaining population and land deeds, then checked which hard labor convicts in the camp were originally from Brook village, and which families had completely died out with no heirs. Finally, he remastered the ownerless wastelands and directly rent-free loaned them to the 20 or so people currently in Brook village. With this division, the farming area in the hands of the Brook villagers directly more than doubled. Everyone acted as if injected with chicken blood, running to the fields. Even the hard labor convicts were jealous when they saw it. Originally, that bunch wanted to lie flat and be hard laborers for the rest of their lives to atone for their sins. Now seeing this, perform well, wash off their sins early to restore freeman status, and maybe next time land is distributed, they'll get a share. The village's production enthusiasm was instantly pushed up hard by me again. Then I stared at Solar War Chariot number 2 bumping up and down on the dirt road, and a new idea popped up. To get rich, build roads first. So I brazenly ran to a nearby construction site, mooched a little cement and sand from the workers, and went home to mix the slurry myself. Then I reached into the box, used a small metal scraper to forcibly scrape out a new path between Oakhaven village and Brook village, then poured the mortar in, and smoothed it with a plastic sheet. To the little people of the Middle Ages, this was the supreme miracle of the Holy Lord splitting mountains and cracking rocks, paving roads with a river of ash. To me, it was just painting a small concrete road 7.5 centimeters wide and 15 meters long inside the box. 7 days later, the road dried. As soon as the new road opened, everyone in the village ran to watch. The adults first stepped on it carefully, marveling so hard and so smooth, simply like the great roads of ancient Rome. The kids directly used the slopes as slides, sliding down sitting, and were fiercely beaten by the adults. As for Garrick and Tob driving Solar War Chariot number 2 racing wildly on the concrete road, a 6-mile journey originally required arguing for 48 sentences. Now it was only enough for them to argue for 24 sentences before arriving at the station. This wave, infrastructure upgraded, traffic efficiency doubled. After that, the box had a rare period of calm. Baron Charles came to the ancient family's fortress every few days to ask for grain, continuing to dispense porridge to save the people. Sir Derek wasn't dead either. The new baron had no time to deal with him, and the two sides temporarily lived in peace. In the royal city, the newly enthroned young king gnashed his teeth looking at the letters pleading for disaster relief from the north, but because he had to deal with the powerful archbishop first, he could only suppress the matters and do nothing. And I finally got some rest time, every morning casually dropping some basic supplies to the village, turning on the nebulizer for some light rain, and for the remaining time I began to enjoy my suddenly wealthy life, transferring money to my parents to buy a house, getting fiercely rejected by my old man, going out to eat good food alone, watching movies alone, strolling night markets alone. Women will only affect the speed at which I draw my sword. I was quite satisfied with this current state. Until this evening, after my old friend Kai Zinzi and I finished enjoying the breeze and eating barbecue by the river, I went home, sat down by the box, and habitually patrolled around the two villages. Everything in the village was as usual. Ilura was leading the kids in jumping rubber bands, the scholar Iman was holding a pointer chasing truant kids to beat them, and the papermaker Lorcan was sitting in the artisan district bragging, saying he had gone to the market town to rope in a few artisan friends who would come join them in a few days. Right at this moment, the urgent sound of horse hooves suddenly rang out outside the fortress. A carriage galloped over, flanked by several fully armed knights. As the carriage stopped, Viscount Eldrick, wearing a velvet cape, jumped down. First, he laughed loudly looking up, boasting that his driving skills hadn't gotten rusty, and then solemnly drew a cross toward the cathedral spire in the sky in a salute. Barnaby came out to greet him, asking what the matter was. The Viscount said in a deep voice, "I wish to board my wife and son at Oakhaven's fortress, and hope Lord Barnaby will look after them." Hearing this, Barnaby's heart immediately skipped a beat. The Viscount sighed. In the Blackwood Mountains to the north, a band of rebel thieves has gathered, already numbering in the thousands. White Raven Manor could be attacked at any time. I thought about it back and forth, and can only send my wife and son here first to this indestructible God-bestowed fortress to avoid the danger. When Barnaby heard thousands, his face changed. The Viscount continued to explain that it wasn't the previous roving bandits making a comeback. Rather, the territories of several barons and counts in the north had all descended into chaos. Rebel armies were rising everywhere, and the situation was even worse than the market town previously. Listening from the sky, I could only sigh silently. What was bound to come finally came. The kingdom-wide riot triggered by the medieval Great Famine had begun. After leaving his wife and son in the village, the Viscount still had to return to White Raven Manor to organize the knight's defense. Before leaving, he placed his hand on his chest solemnly. "If White Raven Manor cannot hold, I will have no choice but to come beg your noble family to save our lives again." Barnaby returned the salute. "If the situation looks bad, come immediately." Once the Viscount left, I felt a bit creeped out in my heart too. Although this guy was at Sundra Noble, after getting along for a long time, there were bound to be some feelings. Really watching him take a long sword to go head-to-head with thousands of rebel troops, that scene was no different from Don Quixote single-handedly challenging the windmills. So I immediately made a final decision. Deploy Solar War Chariot number 3. This car was larger than the previous two, fully 14 centimeters long, placed into the Middle Ages over there. It was 28 meters, a proper heavy semi-trailer truck level. Garrick and Tob stood in front of the car with their heads tilted back, their mouths gaping wide open. This big? If it isn't big enough, how can it transport heavy siege weapons? Barnaby rewarded them each with a rap on the head, telling them the Holy Lord wanted them to deliver city defense equipment to White Raven Manor. After 2 days of training, Solar War Chariot number 3 officially set off, carrying a full truckload of trebuchets, driving sluggishly towards White Raven Manor over 40 miles away. At the same time, the Sheriff Sir Derek was also taking his 100-plus spearmen rushing to the Blackwood Mountains. He cursed the whole way, greeting the 18 generations of ancestors of the Northern Lords, his core ideology being just one. I just barely suppressed the crap in my territory. How come foreign county rebel armies are roaming over here now? But cursing was cursing. This old brother's strategic thinking remained extremely stable. He definitely couldn't win a fight, so first go to White Raven Manor to freeload food and drinks. If that could scare off the rebel army, great. If a real fight broke out, immediately run away and then petition the king. The thieves' momentum is too great. It is a non-combat crime, not my fault for losing. When Derek arrived at White Raven Manor and saw Garrick and the others driving a supergiant truck to deliver trebuchets, his whole person was dumbfounded. What was even more dumbfounding was that those colorful plastic trebuchets not only didn't break from falling, but were also very bouncy and elastic. After loading stones and smashing the mechanism with a hammer, they could actually throw the giant stones outside the manor, crashing to the ground. Derek's defenses broke on the spot. God, what kind of ghost weapons are these? Before he could finish digesting this, the second truckload arrived. This time, what was delivered were 10 miniature Roman heavy ballistae. Although they were 1:200 miniature ancient war chariots custom-made by the toy factory, and the arrowheads were blunt plastic pieces, the Viscount's brain turned quickly. He immediately had people whittle pointed wooden stakes and install iron tips over the arrowheads. In the blink of an eye, a batch of toy giant crossbows upgraded into genuine city defense lethal weapons. Thus, the small White Raven Manor acquired 10 trebuchets and 10 Roman heavy ballistae all in one breath. Derek stood on the manor's city wall, watching dumbfounded. The more he looked, the more he felt something was wrong with Oakhaven village. When he heard the Viscount casually say these things were all transported from Oakhaven, his brain instantly flashed back to the terrifying witch's laugh he heard when approaching the village at night last time. The Viscount casually remarked, "Is Oakhaven Fortress a place that can be night raided?" Falling into Derek's ears, this automatically translated into, "Going to Oakhaven at night will result in being dragged down to hell by demons." This guy's body hair stood on end on the spot, and he warned his adjutant in a low voice, "From now on, when it's dark, even if you beat me to death, don't get near that place. I don't want to see God yet." On the other side, in the Blackwood Mountains, the real big trouble finally showed its face. Two rebel armies from the northern territories converged in the mountains. One leader was called Mud Swamp Marvin, the other leader was called Left Hand Buck. The two sides combined had over 6,000 people, but the ruthless bandits who could truly fight were no more than 1,000. The remaining vast majority were ordinary serfs and the old, weak women and children dragging their families along. The reason they huddled into the mountains was that the roads to the west and north were all blocked by the king's grand army, especially to the north, where the kingdom's great general Duke Montgomery had begun to show his brilliance, hacking Left Hand Buck all the way into the mountains. The two thief bosses chewed on roast deer legs and disgust. They couldn't go back north, so the only option left was Baron Charles territory to the south. And they had also heard that the Baron was dispensing porridge at the market town cathedral and had grain on hand. So the two hit it off instantly, charge into the market town, loot the grain, chop the dog nobles. As soon as the news reached the market town, the Baron's territory instantly became a boiling pot again. The psychological shadow left by the last riot hadn't dispersed yet. Upon hearing that there was another rebel army of several thousand in the mountains, everyone immediately felt in danger. Baron Charles couldn't sit still either. He immediately organized the guards and mercenaries, and also agitated the countrymen outside the city to form a militia, throwing together an army of about 100 people. But pulling together troops was easy. Issuing weapons became a massive problem. He quickly called over the old craftsman from the royal armory, ordering him to forge weapons with all his might. As a result, the old craftsman looked extremely embarrassed. Lord Baron, the blacksmiths in the armory are not enough anymore. It turned out that recently, a large number of blacksmiths doing hard labor suddenly inexplicably gained confidence. One by one, they took out large sums of silver coins, bought charters of freedom to redeem their status, patted their butts, and left, causing a huge swathe of empty spaces in the blacksmith shops. Charles brain spun, and he quickly deduced it. Someone was providing money from behind the scenes, helping the artisans buy their freedom. And this person had immense power and wealth. If it wasn't a great noble from the royal city, it was that mysterious hidden family. Upon investigating, sure enough, Oakhaven, Charles suddenly realized, so it's that ancient family again. Thus, he immediately instructed the finance officer, you personally make a trip to Oakhaven Fortress and borrow weapons from them. This is for the commoners of the territory, not for my selfish desires. Since this family with profound foundations are kind-hearted people, they absolutely will not stand by and watch us die. The finance officer wiped his sweat, placed his hand on his chest, and accepted the order. While I sat outside the box, watching all of this, the corners of my mouth slowly curled up. Grain, rainwater, roads, vehicles, artisans, city defense equipment. The logistics channels had been opened up, and the basic foundation had begun to spread out. Next, this small medieval continent was soon about to welcome a true sense of the prelude to industrialization.